You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. We're reading today from the Mueller report. This is page 45. It's the section is titled "The GRU." That's the intelligence unit inside the Russian government. The GRU's transfer of stolen material to WikiLeaks. Both the GRU and WikiLeaks sought to hide their communications, which has limited the office's ability to collect all of the communications between them. Thus, although it is clear that the stolen DNC and Podesta documents were transferred from the GRU to WikiLeaks, and then the rest of the page is blacked out by Bill Barr. Page 46. The office was able to identify when the GRU, operating through its personas Guccifer 2.0 and DC Leaks, transferred some of the stolen documents to WikiLeaks through online archives set up by the GRU. Assange had access to the internet from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, England. And then there's a paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. On July 14, 2016, GRU officers used a Guccifer 2.0 email account to send WikiLeaks an email bearing the subject Big Archive and the message A New Attempt. The email contained an encrypted attachment with the name WKDNC link1.text.gpg. Using the Guccifer 2.0 Twitter account, GRU officers sent WikiLeaks an encrypted file and instructions on how to open it. On July 18, 2016, WikiLeaks confirmed in a direct message to the Guccifer 2.0 account that it had, quote, the 1 gig or so archive, end quote, that would make a release of the stolen documents, quote, this week. On July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks released over 20,000 emails and other documents stolen from the DNC computer networks. The Democratic National Convention began 3 days later. Similar communications occurred between WikiLeaks and the GRU-operated person's DC Leaks. On September 15, 2016, DC Leaks wrote to WikiLeaks, "Hi there, I'm from DC Leaks. How could we discuss some submission-related issues? I'm trying to reach out to you via your secured chat, but getting no response. I've got something that might interest you. You won't be disappointed, I promise." The WikiLeaks account responded, "Hi there," without further elaboration. The DC Leaks account did not respond immediately. That same day, the Twitter account, Guccifer2, sent DC Leaks a direct message, which is the first known contact between the personas. During subsequent communications, going to page 47, Guccifer 2.0 persona informed DC Leaks that WikiLeaks was trying to contact DC Leaks and arrange for a way to speak through encrypted emails. An analysis of the metadata collected from the WikiLeaks site revealed that the stolen Podesta emails show a creation date of September 19, 2016. Based on information about Assange's computer and its possible operating system, this date may be when the GRU staged the stolen Podesta emails for transfer to WikiLeaks, as the GRU had previously done in July 2016 for the DNC emails. The WikiLeaks site also released PDFs and other documents taken from Podesta that were attachments to emails in his account. These documents had a creation date of October 2nd, 2016, which appears to be the date the attachments were separately staged by WikiLeaks on its site. Beginning on September 20, 2016, WikiLeaks and DC Leaks resumed communications in a brief exchange. On September 22nd, 2016, a DC Leaks email account, dcleaksproject@gmail.com, sent an email to a WikiLeaks account with the subject submission and the message "Hi from DC Leaks." The email contained a PGP encrypted message with the file name wiki_mail.txt.gpg. Next sentence is blacked out by Bill Barr. The email, however, bears a number of similarities to the July 14, 2016 email in which GRU officers used the Guccifer 2.0 persona to give WikiLeaks access to the archive of DNC files. On September 22, 2016, the same day of DC Leaks' email to WikiLeaks, the Twitter account @DCLeaks sent a single message to @WikiLeaks with a string of characters, and then the rest of that paragraph is blacked out by Bill Barr. The office cannot rule out that stolen documents were transferred to WikiLeaks through intermediaries who visited during the summer of 2016. For example, public reporting identified Andrew Muller-Maghun as a WikiLeaks associate who may have assisted with the transfer of these stolen documents to WikiLeaks. And then the rest of page 47 is redacted by Bill Barr. Page 48, first paragraph is redacted by Bill Barr. On October 7, 2016, WikiLeaks released the first email stolen from the Podesta email account. In total, WikiLeaks released 33 tranches of stolen emails between October 7, 2016 and November 7, 2016. The releases included private speeches given by Clinton, internal communications between Podesta and other high-ranking members of the Clinton campaign, and correspondence related to the Clinton Foundation. In total, WikiLeaks released over 50,000 documents stolen from Podesta's personal email account. The last in time email released from Podesta's account was dated March 21, 2016, 2 days after Podesta received a spear-phishing email sent by the GRU. D. WikiLeaks statement dissembling about the source of stolen materials. As reports attributing the DNC and DCCC hacks to the Russian government emerged, WikiLeaks and Assange made several public statements apparently designed to obscure the source of the materials that WikiLeaks was releasing. The file transfer, evidence described above, and other information uncovered during the investigation discredit WikiLeaks' claims about the source of the material that it posted. Beginning in the summer of 2016, Assange and WikiLeaks made a number of statements about And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Wow. What do we do if the executive branch refuses to carry out the law? Right? I mean, I put this forward as a serious question. I have an article that is, running all over the internet right now. It's on a number of sites. I think right now it's probably easiest to find on Common Dreams or on TruthDig or Raw Story. How Our Republic Could Die in the Age of Trump, in a Stunning Parallel to the Fall of Rome, is the title. And, what I'm pointing out here, and I think this is really worth pointing out because I think most Americans, frankly, didn't study civics, and so they don't get all this stuff. But it's pretty important stuff, is that the only branch of government that actually has legal enforcement power, that has the power of the police, is the executive branch. It's given, the Constitution divides our government into three parts: Articles 1, Article 2, Article 3, right? Articles 1, 2, and 3. Article 1 is Congress. Congress has no police power. They have, they've got the sergeant at arms, basically. They can control their own chamber, but they have no meaningful police power. That's Article 1. Article 3 are the courts. The courts have no police power. They can make court orders all day long, bang their gavels, yell and scream, but if the Article 2 branch of government, the executive branch of government, the president and the agencies under the president, all of the police agencies, the FBI and whatnot, all of the military agencies, the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, and, you know, if they don't go along with an enforcement, then it doesn't happen. And, you know, like I said, I think most Americans don't realize this because they never, you know, most Americans, or at least most Americans under 50, never studied civics. Alexander Hamilton laid this out in Federalist Number 78. You know, he said, you know, the courts, the legislature has the power to appropriate and spend money, but they do not have the power of the police. The courts have the power to decide what is legal and what is not, or what is the law, or what, you know, to rule on things, but they don't have the power to enforce their decisions. Only the president, only the executive has the power to actually enforce. So let me just go through this thought experiment with you, and I'd like to ask you where you think this might end. We start out, Congress opens impeachment hearings, which gives Congress even more power to demand things, to subpoena people. They can say to Don McGahn, you can try to ignore this. Right now, the Justice Department is saying McGahn can't testify because it has nothing to do with a legitimate legislative purpose. Well, the Constitution makes it very clear that impeachment is a legitimate purpose of Congress. So if the Judiciary Committee opens an impeachment hearing, and they say, okay, Don McGahn, you have to come and testify, and McGahn still refuses to testify, then they go to the courts, right? McGahn and Trump are refusing to, McGahn's refusing to testify, Trump is refusing to turn over documents. Just like Nixon initially refused to turn over the White House tapes, said, nope, that's privileged. So then it goes to the courts. In fact, right now, Trump's taxes are going to the D.C. Circuit Court. The chief judge there is Merrick Garland. This is going to be interesting. But anyhow, it goes to the courts. And it works its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says to the president, just like they did with Nixon, you've got to let McGahn testify. This is an impeachment hearing. You can't say no. And so Congress holds a hearing, and McGahn doesn't show up. So Congress now has a legal court order from the Supreme Court saying McGahn has to testify. They send that legal court order over to the White House and say, you must use your police powers to transport McGahn to Congress and have him testify. Right? Use the Secret Service, use the Capitol Police, use the military, use whatever you want. You've got all the police powers. And the guy who would enforce that would be the head of the Justice Department, because that's where all the police powers are, right? And that's Bill Barr. And Bill Barr says, by the way, there's a precedent for this. As Andrew Jackson said twice during his presidency, once with the Trail of Tears, when the Supreme Court ruled against him and said, you must stop the Trail of Tears, and he said, tough luck. He said, Roger Taney has made his decision, let him enforce it. Roger Taney, at the time, was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And he did the Trail of Tears anyway. He completely ignored the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court has no power to enforce their actions. And then the Supreme Court again ruled that Andrew Jackson couldn't end the Second Bank of the United States. And Jackson said, I'm going to do it. And he pulled the charter on the Second Bank, and the Second Bank shut down, and we slid into the worst, deepest, and longest depression in the history of the United States because Andrew Jackson defied the Supreme Court, but he just said, I'm not going to do it. So Congress holds the hearings. They submit the lawful court order from the Supreme Court to the executive branch. Trump gives it to Bill Barr. Bill Barr says, I'm not going to force McGahn to testify. And Congress is sitting there on their thumbs. And, you know, Trump says to Congress, says to Jerry Nadler, okay, enforce your own decision. Good luck, which is essentially what he's been saying all along. So then Congress issues a contempt citation and says, you know, Don McGahn has to go to jail if he won't come and testify. The contempt citation goes to the courts. It goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says, yep, Don McGahn's in contempt of Congress. Throw him in jail. They say that to the president, to the executive branch. Hey, it's your branch. He worked for you. He's refusing to testify under your orders. So you have to put him in one of our jails. We got all kinds of federal prisons. The president runs those. And the president says, no, I'm not going to do it. What do we do? I mean, at that point, have we become a full-blown strongman form of government? Have we lost our democracy? See, the simple fact of the matter is, as I point out in this article that, as I said, is all over the internet right now, is that Congress and the courts really do not have the power to enforce their own laws that Congress makes or rulings that the courts make. The only agency that can enforce those, that can use the power, the literal force power of government, the power to use handcuffs and guns and jail cells, the only branch that has that power is the executive branch, the Article II branch. And if they refuse to use that power, what do we do? Now, they have refused to use that power in the past. This happened, you know, Harriet Miers was supposed to testify before Congress when George W. Bush was president. He said, no, she's not going to testify. They took it to court. The court said, yes, she has to testify. Bush ignored it. That term of Congress expired. It expires every two years. And this current term of Congress will expire at the end of 2020, next year. And when that term of Congress expired, their order expired. Their demand that Harriet Miers come and testify. And so it became moot. Bush won. Same thing happened in the Fast and Furious investigation, where Eric Holder testified before Congress 7 times, turned over hundreds of thousands of documents, and Congress still wanted him to come back. And at that point, he was like, okay, this is just harassment from the Republicans in Congress. I'm not going to do it. They held him in contempt. The courts sustained it. But by that time, a new Congress had been installed and the old stuff was gone. So have we, you know, it's like we've been on this road for a while, getting here. But if this becomes totally obvious, now you want to take this a step farther, a step even more extreme? The president Trump refuses to allow McGahn to testify. And it could be anybody, by the way. I'm using McGahn as just an example. Refuses to turn over his tax returns. Pick your poison, as it were. Trump refuses to do it. The Supreme Court orders it. Trump says, no, I ain't going to do it. So the Congress says, okay, we're going to impeach you for that. That was Article 3 of the Nixon impeachments, is that he defied a subpoena. And so they hold hearings and they impeach him in the House of Representatives, and it goes to the Senate. And let's say at this point, it's so obvious what Trump is doing, and it's so disgusting and it's so horrifying that a couple of dozen Republicans in the Senate say, okay, we're with you. And they convict him in the Senate and say, sorry, you got to leave office. And Trump at that point says, I'm not going. And he turns to his own military and says, you guys with me or not? What happens? I mean, the last time something close to that last scenario that I just described happened was when Abraham Lincoln refused to enforce the Supreme Court order by Roger Taney, again, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, in Dred Scott. Dred Scott, the Supreme Court, in the Dred Scott decision, said that black people are slaves everywhere in the United States, not just slaves, property. And Abraham Lincoln became president, and he said, I am not going to enforce that Supreme Court decision. And a bunch of people in the South said, well, if you're not going to enforce that decision, then we're not going to go along with you. A bunch of the military in the South, the southern states themselves, every state has a militia. It's called a National Guard now. They were called militias back then. It's the same thing. And the state militias and the state governments in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, within a month or so of Abraham Lincoln becoming president, as I recall, I'm not the Civil War historian at that level of granularity, said, okay, we're pulling out of the Republic. And we fought a war for several years and killed 600,000 Americans in the process through this, because of this, right? In part because the president refused to enforce a Supreme Court order. What do you think is going to happen? How do you see this playing out?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Or there's another possible scenario. What if, people turn out in the streets? Now, are those people going to be the supporters of the presidents or the opponents of the presidents, or both? And welcome back. Pretty amazing stuff. Corky in Hilton, New York. Hey, Corky, what's on your mind today?
I just think we got to get this ass clown out of there before we wind up in a war. That's what he wants. He wants to be the leader of a war.
Oh, I agree. And I think that, and that's something I didn't include in this equation because I'm kind of trying to keep this conversation limited to what do we do if the executive branch refuses to do their job under the Constitution. But, one of the things that, and I've been saying this for weeks now, we know about Donald Trump is that at least when Barack Obama was president, Trump thought that the way that that Obama was going to get himself reelected was by getting into a war, specifically with Iran. And Trump is doing his very best to do that right now. And it concerns me tremendously. So, we'll see where it goes. Corky, thanks. Paul in New York City. Hey, Paul, what's up?
How are you, Tom? Tom, just so you know, I've been in the military. If the president is impeached and asked to leave, it is the duty of the generals to remove him from office. Okay?
Where does it say that in the Constitution?
It doesn't say that in the Constitution, but you have an oath that you take as an officer and a gentleman. So if he's impeached, he's going to be asked to leave. Wasn't there a case where a bunch of guys went to, when Herbert Hoover was in office, and they went to this Marine general and tried to overthrow the government? It was during the Great Depression. Yeah,
it wasn't Herbert Hoover, though. It was Franklin Roosevelt. And the general was Smedley Butler. And it was a couple of half a dozen very, very wealthy industrialists. The DuPont family was apparently involved in this, or at least one of the DuPonts, and a few others. And Congress looked into it, and Franklin Roosevelt shut down the congressional hearings because he didn't want anybody else getting ideas.
Tom, my very personal opinion is Congress needs to do their job. They need to investigate. They need to impeach. They need to let the
But how can they do their
happen.
job if the testimony and the documents that they need to do the investigation are not available to them because the executive branch refuses to comply with
You're
their...
100% right. That's where Nancy needs to start opening up that jail that's in the bottom and start throwing those people and start filling it
She
up.
has no police to do that. And by the way,
Capitol
that jail
Police?
in the bottom of the Capitol building, that jail has been holding the Lincoln carriage, the truck
What
or
about
whatever.
the Capitol Police, Tom? What about the Capitol?
The Capitol Police have authority in the Capitol building.
Yeah. So,
Unless Don McGahn wanders into the Capitol building, they can't do anything.
Tough. That's tough. Well, then we really are in some problems.
That's what I'm saying, Paul. I mean,
Oh, man. All right. Well, hopefully there'll be people, lawyers that you have that probably know what actual laws can happen over there that will call in.
Well, see, the problem is the only branch of government that can actually enforce any law is the executive branch. That's why in the oath of office and in the Constitution it specifies the oath of office for the president. And it says that he will faithfully execute the laws of the United States. In other words, Congress makes the laws, the judiciary adjudicates them, and the president is required. His oath of office is to execute those laws, faithfully execute the laws. He is not doing that right now. The law says he has to turn over his taxes. He's refusing to do that.
I agree with you 100%. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Paul. So this is where we're at. We'll be back. It's 22 and a half minutes past the hour. Stick around. By the way, all across the country, people are showing up in the streets literally right now as we speak. It's scheduled for noon wherever you are. So it's noon right now on the East Coast, noon 23. It'll be noon in a little over a half hour in the Central Time Zone, in a couple of hours on the Mountain Time Zone, and at the end of this show, it'll be noon here on the West Coast. And the hashtag is Stop the Bans, and we're talking about banning abortion. And people are showing up at their state houses, at their town squares, to request that these Republican-controlled states stop banning abortion. And so if you are, since right now it's happening on the East Coast, if you have been to one of these and you'd like to report and let us know how it's going, feel free to give us a shout. If you're planning on going, you can. The website for all the information is stopabortionbans.org. So my question: what do we do? Are we looking at a slow motion coup d'etat by the executive branch? I think we are. Kathy in Crystal Lake, Illinois. Hey, Kathy, your thoughts?
Hey, Tom. I'm glad you're talking about this today. I spent the weekend talking to everybody I knew about this. I knew, for some reason, Inauguration Day that this was going to happen. I don't know why, but I just did. But at this point, the Senate knew that Barr was going to pretty much back Trump no matter what he did. I think that they knew that they were going to get a yes man, and I think the fix has been in for a very long time. When you look at what Congress, what the Senate has done, what Mitch McConnell has done, I think it's been clear. We have been watching a coup in real time for about a year and a half. And once the Supreme Court rules, they've got to turn over, they've got to allow the testimony, they're going to ignore it. I have no doubt they will ignore it, and I have no doubt that when that happens, you will know the coup is complete. Now, I don't know what we do about it. I mean, that's the scary thing. What do we do? We talked a few months ago about whether or not Trump get his little militia people out and stage some kind of war. His friend Donnie Deutsch seems to think that he will start a civil war to stay in power. I don't know, but I think at this point we're kind of screwed because Bob Barr is going to do whatever the president wants him to, and like you said, the enforcement is with the executive branch. Without that enforcement, there's lawlessness. There is absolutely no law in this government, in this country, and I am. I'm 57. I'm terrified.
Yeah, and this is the point. Let's not be terrified. Let's be active here. Let's.
We need to be active,
but we need to envision any possible scenario here, and that's why the point that I made in this article that's floating all over the internet right now about the parallels between America and Rome. The point that I made is that it's always been that way, right? Literally from the George Washington administration to today. Hillary Clinton didn't want to testify for 8 hours before Congress, but she did anyway. Nixon didn't want to turn over the tapes when the Supreme Court ordered him to, but he did anyway. It wasn't because they were afraid that the police were going to show up and throw them in jail. It wasn't that they were afraid of some police power. There was none that would compel them unless it came out of the executive branch itself. Nixon wasn't going to order himself thrown in jail, but he did it because he respected the institution of the Supreme Court and the Constitution of the United States. Donald Trump respects neither. And apparently neither does Bill Barr. And that, I think, Kathy, has put us into a very, very dangerous situation. And I am hoping that one of my listeners, has noticed something that I've missed here, that there is some way out of this that I'm missing, because I don't see it. Kathy, thank you for the call. We've got to figure this thing out. Let's do it together. It's 28 minutes, coming up on 28 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
What should our country do? How do we respond when the executive branch refuses to execute the laws? Their single job. We're reading today from the Mueller report. This is page 45. It's the section is titled "The GRU." That's the intelligence unit inside the Russian government. the GRU's transfer of stolen material to WikiLeaks. Both the GRU and WikiLeaks sought to hide their communications, which has limited the office's ability to collect all of the communications between them. Thus, although it is clear that the stolen DNC and Podesta documents were transferred from the GRU to WikiLeaks, and then the rest of the page is blacked out by Bill Barr. Page 46. The office was able to identify when the GRU, operating through its personas Guccifer 2.0 and DC Leaks, transferred some of the stolen documents to WikiLeaks through online archives set up by the GRU. Assange had access to the internet from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, England. And then there's a paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. On July 14, 2016, GRU officers used a Guccifer 2.0 email account to send WikiLeaks an email bearing the subject Big Archive and the message A New Attempt. The email contained an encrypted attachment with the name WKDNC link1.text.gpg. Using the Guccifer 2.0 Twitter account, GRU officers sent WikiLeaks an encrypted file and instructions on how to open it. On July 18, 2016, WikiLeaks confirmed in a direct message to the Guccifer 2.0 account that it had, quote, the 1 gig or so archive, end quote, that would make a release of the stolen documents, quote, this week. On July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks released over 20,000 emails and other documents stolen from the DNC computer networks. The Democratic National Convention began 3 days later. Similar communications occurred between WikiLeaks and the GRU-operated person's DC Leaks. On September 15, 2016, DC Leaks wrote to WikiLeaks, "Hi there, I'm from DC Leaks. How could we discuss some submission-related issues? I'm trying to reach out to you via your secured chat, but getting no response. I've got something that might interest you. You won't be disappointed, I promise." The WikiLeaks account responded, "Hi there," without further elaboration. The DC Leaks account did not respond immediately. That same day, the Twitter account, Guccifer2, sent DC Leaks a direct message, which is the first known contact between the personas. During subsequent communications, going to page 47, Guccifer 2.0 persona informed DC Leaks that WikiLeaks was trying to contact DC Leaks and arrange for a way to speak through encrypted emails. An analysis of the metadata collected from the WikiLeaks site revealed that the stolen Podesta emails show a creation date of September 19, 2016. Based on information about Assange's computer and its possible operating system, this date may be when the GRU staged the stolen Podesta emails for transfer to WikiLeaks, as the GRU had previously done in July 2016 for the DNC emails. The WikiLeaks site also released PDFs and other documents taken from Podesta that were attachments to emails in his account. These documents had a creation date of October 2nd, 2016, which appears to be the date the attachments were separately staged by WikiLeaks on its site. Beginning on September 20, 2016, WikiLeaks and DC Leaks resumed communications in a brief exchange. On September 22nd, 2016, a DC Leaks email account, dcleaksproject@gmail.com, sent an email to a WikiLeaks account with the subject submission and the message "Hi from DC Leaks." The email contained a PGP encrypted message with the file name wiki_mail.txt.gpg. Next sentence is blacked out by Bill Barr. The email, however, bears a number of similarities to the July 14, 2016 email in which GRU officers used the Guccifer 2.0 persona to give WikiLeaks access to the archive of DNC files. On September 22, 2016, the same day of DC Leaks' email to WikiLeaks, the Twitter account @DCLeaks sent a single message to @WikiLeaks with a string of characters, and then the rest of that paragraph is blacked out by Bill Barr. The office cannot rule out that stolen documents were transferred to WikiLeaks through intermediaries who visited during the summer of 2016. For example, public reporting identified Andrew Muller-Maghun as a WikiLeaks associate who may have assisted with the transfer of these stolen documents to WikiLeaks. And then the rest of page 47 is redacted by Bill Barr. Page 48, first paragraph is redacted by Bill Barr. On October 7, 2016, WikiLeaks released the first emails stolen from the Podesta email account. In total, WikiLeaks released 33 tranches of stolen emails between October 7, 2016 and November 7, 2016. The releases included private speeches given by Clinton, internal communications between Podesta and other high-ranking members of the Clinton campaign, and correspondence related to the Clinton Foundation. In total, WikiLeaks released over 50,000 documents stolen from Podesta's personal email account. The last in time email released from Podesta's account was dated March 21, 2016, 2 days after Podesta received a spear phishing email sent by the GRU. D. WikiLeaks statement dissembling about the source of stolen materials. As reports attributing the DNC and DCCC hacks to the Russian government emerged, WikiLeaks and Assange made several public statements apparently designed to obscure the source of the materials that WikiLeaks was releasing. The file transfer, evidence described above, and other information uncovered during the investigation discredit WikiLeaks' claims about the source of the material that it posted. Beginning in the summer of 2016, Assange and WikiLeaks made a number of statements about Seth Rich, a former DNC staff member who was killed in July of 2016. The statements about Rich implied falsely that he had been the source of the stolen DNC emails. It's the Mueller report. History of guns and the Second Amendment. I'll be in New York, Washington, D.C., Portland, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and Minneapolis. Here I come. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. StopAbortionBans.org, by the way, for the activities that are going on all across the nation today. What do we do? How do we deal with a lawless president, particularly when he is being enabled by a lawless attorney general and by Republicans in the House and Senate? I don't, if you caught this morning, Jerry Nadler literally reading out loud, from the chairman's seat in Congress, in the House Judiciary Committee, literally reading out loud the parts of the Barr report, or summarizing them, that defined crimes committed by Donald Trump, obstruction of justice, crimes committed by Donald Trump. And then Doug Collins, I think is his name, the number two, the Republican, the number two person on the committee, gave this impassioned 5-minute-long rant about this is all politics, and the Mueller report says no collusion and no, it just totally exoneration, just lies through his teeth. So the Republicans are enabling him. What do we do? Charles in Jacksonville, Florida. Hey, Charles, what's up?
One of your earlier callers had the right idea.
Okay.
I'm a retired federal worker, and anybody that works for the United States government takes the similar oath that Donald Trump, to uphold the laws and to defend the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic.
Well, hang on, Charles. His is to execute the laws. In other words, he's in charge of making sure that the laws are followed.
What I would do is, if I was Congress, I would declare Donald Trump and Bill Barr enemies to the Constitution, and that should free up any federal worker that may have those documents to go ahead and release them on their own, because they're releasing it to defend the Constitution.
You realize what you're suggesting is what Robert E. Lee did.
No, I would say.
That's what the Southern states did, and that initiated the Civil War, is they said that, Abraham Lincoln is refusing to follow the order of the Supreme Court. We disagree with him. We believe that he is, he is not executing the laws of the land as determined by the Supreme Court. Roger Taney, and by the way, I said earlier that Andrew Jackson was defying Roger Taney. It wasn't. It was John Marshall, but go ahead.
Not to cut you off, I believe that's what Donald Trump wants. He doesn't.
I'm having a hard time figuring this one out, Charles, because it's like, Donald Trump is all the time yelling about Joe Biden. Is that because he's afraid of Joe Biden, or because he thinks he has the best chance of beating Joe Biden, as opposed to, say, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, some of the other strong, candidates? I don't know the answer to that question. Donald Trump is basically daring Congress to impeach him. Is that because he thinks impeachment will be a good thing for him, or is that because he's trying to, show how much testosterone he has? I don't know the answer to that question either. I have lost the ability to look inside this man's mind.
Can I say this?
Please.
Just that the Congress, let me rephrase that, the Democrats in the Congress are going about it the wrong way. They're trying to convince the Republicans. The hell with the Republicans. Convince the people. And once you convince the people, regardless of what the Republicans do, if they do the wrong thing, then at that point, we will vote them out.
I get that. No, you're absolutely right, Charles, and that's the most important point. And that's what Nancy Pelosi and Jerry Nadler are trying to do right now. They know that when the Watergate impeachment hearings began back in 1974, when those hearings began, there was 19% support across the United States for impeaching the president, and not one single Republican was with them. After 6 weeks of hearings, over 60% of the American public was in favor of impeachment, and all the Republicans said, okay, that's it, he's got to go, and Nixon resigned. That's why they're trying to hold the hearings, and that's also why Trump is refusing to let any witnesses attend those hearings.
Then anybody that's an attorney like McGahn, who receives a lawful order to speak, if he doesn't speak, he needs to go through disbarment.
Well, you know, I'm not sure that disbarment is. I mean, that's the.
There's got to be a penalty for.
Oh, I agree. There's got to be a penalty. I just, you know, disbarment. I mean, you know, for McGahn it might be a big deal. I mean, you know, for Bill Barr it's not a big deal. The guy's 68 years old. He was going to retire, and instead he became Attorney General. I mean, so anyhow, Charles, thank you. Thank you for the conversation. Some great threads we're pulling on here, and I really appreciate it. Regina in Olympia Fields, Illinois. Hey, Regina, what's up?
Yeah, you guys are freaking me out today. I'm thinking that the power of the purse is probably the best option. I mean, I looked it up under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 9, that the power of the purse is really the only limited executive power that Congress has. And in the Foreign Assistance Act of 74, it eliminated all military funding for the South Vietnam, and that's how the war ended.
Right.
And then the one with Reagan with the Marines from Lebanon. And I'm thinking that if all comes down, then maybe that is the final blow to he just doesn't get any money for. So
you're saying cut off his money. Here's the problem with that. Number one, we've had a couple of presidents defy that, right? Ronald Reagan, there was actually a law passed, and I'm sorry I can't remember the name of it or the author of it. It was named after the congressman who authored it. But there was a law passed that said that the executive branch, Reagan, may not use any federal funds to assist the Contras in Honduras, Nicaragua, or El Salvador. May not do it, right? Explicit law. Reagan sold weapons to the Iranians, took that money, bought weapons with that money, you know, small arms and shoulder-fired rockets, and gave them to these Contras in Central America. And we're still dealing with the consequences of that. It totally disrupted the region. Reagan defied the law. And there was no, you know, he wasn't impeached. He wasn't held responsible. Nothing.
But he had to go out, Tom. He had to go out and do some other illegal things to make that happen. But I know in the Iraq War in 2007, the House passed a bill, or tried to anyway, to stop that war from being funded. But I mean,
a war is much larger. Regina, forgive my interrupting you, but we're coming up on we're not coming up on the break. I'm sorry. Finish your thought. I misread my clock.
No, that's not my only thought. It's just the whole power of the purse kind of thing, the Impoundment Control Act of 74.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But look at what's already happened. Congress, you know, Donald Trump went to Congress and said, I want billions of dollars for a wall. Right? Congress said, cool, we'll give you $20 billion for your wall. All you've got to do is pass DACA. Right? Let these 800,000 young people who came here as children, don't even speak Spanish, let them become citizens. Trump said, no, I'm not going to do it. I still want to build my wall. Congress finally appropriated a little over $1 billion for his wall. Trump wants $5 billion. So what did he do? He said, I'm going to take some of the money out of the military budget and I'm going to use it to build a wall. And he started construction on his wall. He doesn't care what Congress says or does. And there's enough money sloshing around in the federal government. I mean, you know, the federal budget is a couple $1 trillion every year. There's enough money sloshing around there that I don't think that they can, if the House were to vote today to cut off all funding to the executive branch, turn off the lights in the White House and just make it all go brown, it would still have to pass the Senate and be signed by the president. That ain't going to happen.
Well, then we're looking at revolution in the street then, because this is some scary stuff right here. And if we can't figure out, I mean, and if he decides that there won't be an election in 2020, he can do that too.
Well, there's no legal basis for it.
He can decide that, okay, there just won't be an election because we're going to war or because of this or that or the other. Then what? Then we're done.
Right. Or if there is an election and he says, hey, according to the election, Kamala Harris is now president of the United States, but there was a bunch of fraud in that election, so I'm not going to acknowledge it. I'm just going to stay here in the White House.
Right. I know he's going to try that anyway, regardless, unless he wins. We already know that, but either the Army's going to have to...
but he's the commander-in-chief of the Army.
I know, but there got to be people who will defect and say, no.
But at that point, I mean, now, Regina, we're in the conversation that I had with Charles 5 minutes ago.
That's what I said.
Now we're taking the position that Robert E. Lee took. That the president is out of control, and we're not going to put up with it. We're going to. Oh man.
Now we're back to a revolutionary war with the people on the inside doing the fight. I don't know what we can't do anything. I don't know.
Or the Civil War.
Come up with something.
Yeah, amen. Well, hopefully, I'm putting this out here because I don't see, beyond this event, the only event horizon that I can see that would resolve this is if the Senate actually convicts him. He's no longer president of the United States. Mike Pence is the president. And even if Trump doesn't want to leave, he has to leave. Pence actually enforces the law and says, Trump, you got to leave. And Trump leaves. That's the only thing I can see, that the only resolution to this.
No, Russia has stuff on those senators, and he told them what they have on him. That's when they went to Russia in July of whatever year that was.
No, it was last year. It was the 4th of July. You're absolutely right, Regina.
And when they went there, he laid it out for them. This is what I have on you, you, and you. So they're not going to do anything. Wow. All right, Tom, thanks. Yeah, I'm not going to get too afraid.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Regina. Yeah, no, we can't get afraid at all. We need to be as informed as possible about all the possible options and all the possible alternatives, whatever the appropriate word is. And how do we move forward? I mean, I guarantee you, this is a conversation that Democrats are having in Congress that they're not telling you about. I guarantee you. There's a bunch of freaked out people. Where do we go next? We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. David in Park Hills, Missouri. Hey, David, thanks for watching Free Speech. Your thoughts?
Hey, good morning, Tom. I'd vote for Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden for vice president. If Bernie doesn't get elected, I'll vote Green Party. And when the executive branch isn't doing its job, we need to fire him just like anybody else. I think Nancy Pelosi needs to ease up a little bit, and we get into an investigation about impeachment. And one of the
David, that's what she's trying to do right now. That's what Jerry Nadler was trying to do this morning. We're trying to investigate whether this president committed crimes, high crimes and misdemeanors, and the people who could testify as to whether he did or not. And Don McGahn, in fact, told Mueller on multiple occasions that Donald Trump committed crimes, that he ordered him to fire, for example, Robert Mueller. That's a crime. That's an attempt to obstruct justice, an attempt to block an investigation. That's a crime. McGahn has already on the record for that, but he would not appear before Congress today because Trump told him not to. And so how do you do what you are talking about, David? How do you do the investigation if every attempt to investigate is blocked by the executive branch? How do you do it?
One of the options that you gave us is to either go in the streets and be for Trump or against Trump, and I think we need to...
That's the last thing that we should be asking for. I get, going out in the street, like today, all people are protesting the abortion bans. I'm all in favor of that.
Right.
But that's a very different thing than... people going out on the street in the streets and saying, get Trump out of office, which is essentially, calling for something that's extrajudicial and not legal. And then on the other hand, pro-Trump people showing up with all their guns saying, oh, no, we're going to defend him. And, basically we could have these shooting matches in our streets. We don't want that.
But Trump's not that smart. So somebody...
He may not be, but he's got people around him who are. Bill Barr certainly is. Look at what he's doing. And Bill Barr is doing this because of his fundamentalist Catholic beliefs. It's all, you know, he's been saying for years that he's on a mission from God.
I know. We got to thank free speech for at least getting out there and plugging and putting a question forward. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you, David. Dawn in Clinton, Michigan. Hey, Dawn, what's up?
Hi, Tom. This first-time caller.
Thank you.
I'm just curious why we can't arrest the ones that refuse to come into to testify.
Because the police who would have to show up to arrest them are controlled by the executive branch, by the president.
Then what can we do? I mean, we have.
That's my question.
Being more like Trump. We can't be nice. This guy is not nice.
No, I get that. I get that. And I'm not in favor of being nice. I'm also not in favor of civil war. And so my question is, if the Supreme Court says, yes, Don McGahn is in contempt of Congress, that's something you can go to jail for. And they hold him in contempt of Congress. And so then Congress, petitions the Justice Department to have Don McGahn arrested and thrown in jail until he'll testify. And Bill Barr, who is the head of the Justice Department, says, no, I'm not going to do it. What do you do?
Doesn't Don, he lives on the streets now. He's not working for Trump.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who he works for. If he's in contempt, the only agency that can throw him in jail is the Justice Department, as far as I know, unless I'm missing something. I'm hoping some constitutional lawyer is going to call up and set me straight. Dawn, thank you for the call. We'll continue the conversation in just a moment. By the time Hitler had taken over Germany in a way that was unreversible, that was probably the mid-1930s. By the time that happened, most Germans were still debating whether or not Hitler, should be the chancellor, and what about the government, and why don't they do something, and why doesn't the parliament hold him, and, et cetera. By the time Mussolini had taken over Italy, the people were still having, have we passed the point that I'm talking about? Phil in Sun City, Arizona. Phil, your thoughts.
Hi, Tom, and it's Bill.
Bill, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Tom, the Constitution, in its first handful of words, tells us what to do. The Constitution also describes a force that's greater than the three branches of government. The first lines of the Constitution: we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice.
Right.
What's going on is unjust. We are the greater branch of government, whether they believe it or not.
Oh, we the people. Yes.
That's right. And the way we overcome them is by organizing and becoming uniform. And by becoming uniform, I mean just like the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines. We become easily identifiable to each other.
You mean like the brown shirts did in 1933?
Okay.
That was a voluntary civilian force.
A voluntary, but a peaceful one, Tom. I'm talking peace army. I'm not talking brown shirts.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, if you raise a peace army, you say, okay, everybody who opposes the president, go out in the streets and wear blue jeans and a denim shirt. And what are you going to have? You're going to have a whole bunch of skinheads out there with guns.
Let them come. Let them come, Tom.
Yeah. No, Phil, going down this road, I get it that the people are supreme according to our Constitution, and that by that logic, the action that we should be taking is not showing up in the streets. That's civil war. The action we should be taking is voting him out. And I'm totally down with that, totally up, it's 16 ways to Sunday, yes. And that may end up being the only thing we can do, is vote him out. And that being the case, we need to do absolutely everything we can to create as much unity in the Democratic Party and get this guy out of office and the rest of his enabling Republicans with him, the whole bunch of them. I'm with that. But, Phil, I'm not willing to go down the road of we need to be out in the streets by way of confrontation, by way of basically, a military, a show of force. I'm not going there. I'm sorry. And I don't think any of us should. James in Arlington Heights, Illinois. Hey, James, what's on your mind?
Tom, it's a great honor. You are my Bible. I get 100% of my information from you, not because I always agree with you, but because I know if you speak it, it's fact.
Thank you.
I seen this coming back when they wanted Barr to come and testify. I said they were talking about a subpoena. I said if he doesn't go, they've got to ask him to arrest himself.
Exactly.
So I saw this 6 months ago, and I agree with you that all of Congress is spinning in their seats, wondering what to do. A wise man once said the Constitution is just a piece of paper. That's George
W. Bush, yeah.
Yeah. I know that Nancy Pelosi has this small little police force. They may only have jurisdiction in the House, but that's only because the law says they only have jurisdiction in the House. Since Barr and the president are thumbing their nose at the law, I'm sure that her little police force isn't very strong, but, California, Illinois, maybe New York would send a dozen or 2 dozen marshals apiece.
No, wait a minute, James. The minute you do that, you're back to the Robert E. Lee scenario. Robert E. Lee said Lincoln is illegitimate. We are not going to put up with it. And boom, we were in a friggin' civil war. We can't do that again.
Tom, exactly. But you just said earlier on your show that are we headed for a coup? We're not headed for a coup. The coup happened in 2016 on November 2nd, and it is every American's right and responsibility and duty to overthrow anything in any way they can a foreign.
James, once again, when you start using language, when anybody starts using language about overthrowing the government of the United States, you are talking about sedition or treason, and that is just not what's it's not what's going to happen. You're not going to get anybody going along with it, and B, it's against the law, and C, it threatens to take us back in the direction of the Civil War, which would be the very worst thing that could happen. James, I need to move along, but thank you for your contribution. Gus in Chicago. Hey, Gus.
How you doing, Tom? Been a while, big fan.
Thanks.
Essentially, the problem lies in the fact is you've already answered the question because of the fact that both the judicial and legislative branches have handcuffs because they don't have law enforcement power. Also, I'd argue there's a certain level of lack of that. The big issue is we should take basically an example of what's been going on in Brazil, the teacher strikes in West Virginia and Oklahoma, South Korea a couple years ago, is peaceful demonstration, and that actually created demand by the legislator, by the military and all the forces basically to say, there's no more confidence in the government, you must step down.
Right.
The South Korean and
we're seeing
Romania
the edge of this with the Yellow Vest movement in France with Macron.
But South Korea, Romania.
Yeah, I'm fine with peaceful demonstrations.
Just like what's going on now, but it's going to have to be John and Jane Q. Public out on the street, peacefully and legally, marching and demonstrating, basically saying, this man, which you already known as a con man who got in through voter
So do you think that is going to be enough to convince Bill Barr that he should follow the law?
I don't know Bill Barr, but it sure as heck is going to force the military, the law enforcement, and maybe some elements in the Senate to say, Mr. President, you have no more support, and basically, if you want to stay, it's on your own.
Well, now you're going, again, to this thing of, the military is going to save us or law enforcement's going to save us. I don't think anybody's going to save us. I think we've got to save ourselves. Gus, thanks for the call. We'll be back. We'll continue the conversation. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. We're reading today from the Mueller report. This is page 45. It's the section is titled "The GRU." That's the intelligence unit inside the Russian government. The GRU's transfer of stolen material to WikiLeaks. Both the GRU and WikiLeaks sought to hide their communications, which has limited the office's ability to collect all of the communications between them. Thus, although it is clear that the stolen DNC and Podesta documents were transferred from the GRU to WikiLeaks, and then the rest of the page is blacked out by Bill Barr. Page 46. The office was able to identify when the GRU, operating through its personas Guccifer 2.0 and DC Leaks, transferred some of the stolen documents to WikiLeaks through online archives set up by the GRU. Assange had access to the internet from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, England. And then there's a paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. On July 14, 2016, GRU officers used a Guccifer 2.0 email account to send WikiLeaks an email bearing the subject Big Archive and the message A New Attempt. The email contained an encrypted attachment with the name WKDNC link1.text.gpg. Using the Guccifer 2.0 Twitter account, GRU officers sent WikiLeaks an encrypted file and instructions on how to open it. On July 18, 2016, WikiLeaks confirmed in a direct message to the Guccifer 2.0 account that it had, quote, the 1 gig or so archive, end quote, that would make a release of the stolen documents, quote, this week. On July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks released over 20,000 emails and other documents stolen from the DNC computer networks. The Democratic National Convention began 3 days later. Similar communications occurred between WikiLeaks and the GRU-operated person's DC Leaks. On September 15, 2016, DC Leaks wrote to WikiLeaks, "Hi there, I'm from DC Leaks. How could we discuss some submission-related issues? I'm trying to reach out to you via your secured chat, but getting no response. I've got something that might interest you. You won't be disappointed, I promise." The WikiLeaks account responded, "Hi there," without further elaboration. The DC Leaks account did not respond immediately. That same day, the Twitter account, Guccifer2, sent DC Leaks a direct message, which is the first known contact between the personas. During subsequent communications, going to page 47, Guccifer 2.0 persona informed DC Leaks that WikiLeaks was trying to contact DC Leaks and arrange for a way to speak through encrypted emails. An analysis of the metadata collected from the WikiLeaks site revealed that the stolen Podesta emails show a creation date of September 19, 2016. Based on information about Assange's computer and its possible operating system, this date may be when the GRU staged the stolen Podesta emails for transfer to WikiLeaks, as the GRU had previously done in July 2016 for the DNC emails. The WikiLeaks site also released PDFs and other documents taken from Podesta that were attachments to emails in his account. These documents had a creation date of October 2nd, 2016, which appears to be the date the attachments were separately staged by WikiLeaks on its site. Beginning on September 20, 2016, WikiLeaks and DC Leaks resumed communications in a brief exchange. On September 22nd, 2016, a DC Leaks email account, dcleaksproject@gmail.com, sent an email to a WikiLeaks account with the subject submission and the message "Hi from DC Leaks." The email contained a PGP encrypted message with the file name wiki_mail.txt.gpg. Next sentence is blacked out by Bill Barr. The email, however, bears a number of similarities to the July 14, 2016 email in which GRU officers used the Guccifer 2.0 persona to give WikiLeaks access to the archive of DNC files. On September 22, 2016, the same day of DC Leaks' email to WikiLeaks, the Twitter account @DCLeaks sent a single message to @WikiLeaks with a string of characters, and then the rest of that paragraph is blacked out by Bill Barr. The office cannot rule out that stolen documents were transferred to WikiLeaks through intermediaries who visited during the summer of 2016. For example, public reporting identified Andrew Muller-Maghun as a WikiLeaks associate who may have assisted with the transfer of these stolen documents to WikiLeaks. And then the rest of page 47 is redacted by Bill Barr. Page 48, first paragraph, is redacted by Bill Barr. On October 7, 2016, WikiLeaks released the first email stolen from the Podesta email account. In total, WikiLeaks released 33 tranches of stolen emails between October 7, 2016 and November 7, 2016. The releases included private speeches given by Clinton, internal communications between Podesta and other high-ranking members of the Clinton campaign, and correspondence related to the Clinton Foundation. In total, WikiLeaks released over 50,000 documents stolen from Podesta's personal email account. The last in time email released from Podesta's account was dated March 21, 2016, 2 days after Podesta received a spear phishing email sent by the GRU. D. WikiLeaks statement dissembling about the source of stolen materials. As reports attributing the DNC and DCCC hacks to the Russian government emerged, WikiLeaks and Assange made several public statements apparently designed to obscure the source of the materials that WikiLeaks was releasing. The file transfer, evidence described above, and other information uncovered during the investigation discredit WikiLeaks' claims about the source of the material that it posted. Beginning in the summer of 2016, Assange and WikiLeaks made a number of statements about Seth Rich, a former DNC staff member who was killed in July of 2016. The statements about Rich implied falsely that he had been the source of the stolen DNC emails. It's the Mueller report.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So we've been talking about this scenario that I've been rolling around in my head for some time now. I've talked about it somewhat on this program a couple of times. And it has to do with where the actual power lies in our government. And I think, particularly a lot of people, who grew up, say, or went to elementary school, primary school, post Reagan, basically. Didn't study civics in school. A lot of schools no longer teach civics, and it's been that way since the 80s. And so, this whole thing about the three branches of government, a lot of people don't get it. Alexander Hamilton lays it out in Federalist number 78 quite clearly and explicitly. This is my describing it rather than reading it to you because it's all, 18th century language. But basically what he says is, and he was trying to sell the Supreme Court, and so he was talking about how harmless it is. And he said, Congress has the power to appropriate and spend money. But that's it. They make the laws. The courts have the ability to adjudicate the laws, to determine who is guilty of breaking the law and who is innocent, and define what the penalty will be. So the legislature makes the laws. That's Article 1, branch of government. The Article 3 branch of government, the courts, adjudicates the laws. And then once someone is determined to have broken the law, then the courts hand it off to the Article 2 branch of government. That's the executive branch of government, which is where all police power lies, whether it's the military, whether it's the FBI, whether, whatever it may be. Police powers always exist under the executive. In a town, the mayor is the head of the police department, not the city council. Well, that may vary. It may vary from town to town. But if it looked like the federal government, that would be how it is. So this scenario that I played out Right now, we're seeing this dance where it's fairly high stakes, but not quite high stakes, right? Trump is defying subpoenas from Congress, who wants to investigate the crimes that he has committed. We know of at least a dozen crimes that Donald Trump has committed, in addition to, being unfit to hold office and, lying to us 10,000 times and all that kind of stuff. He ordered Don McGahn to defy a subpoena today. That's obstruction of justice. He appealed a federal court's ruling after it upheld a congressional subpoena. His Treasury Department rejected a subpoena to turn over his tax credits. He broke the law. These are violations of the law. And not to mention the 10 or 12 specific obstruction of justice attempts that are outlined in the Mueller report, which clearly points out that Trump broke the law. So right now, everybody's just kind of yelling at each other, and Trump is holding firm and saying, I'm the tough guy. I'm the strong man here. I'm not going to let my people testify. And they're not. So what if Congress pulls out the ultimate weapon that they have, which is impeachment? And they say, okay, fine, we're going to open an impeachment hearing. We now have expanded powers. The Supreme Court will recognize that we have expanded powers. We have grand jury powers. We can compel testimony. We can put people in jail if they refuse to testify. And so they are holding their hearings, and they say to Don McGahn, okay, Don McGahn, you better show up and testify. And Trump says no, and McGahn says no. And so Congress holds McGahn in contempt of Congress. It goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says, McGahn, you have to testify, or you have to go to jail. And Congress says, okay, the hearing's today. Where's McGahn? He's not here. Okay, send him to jail. Well, who do they ask to send McGahn to jail? The head of the Justice Department. They send that request to Donald Trump and Bill Barr. You think Bill Barr is going to put Don McGahn in jail? The limit of Congress's police power is basically the building. They have a sergeant at arms. They have their own police department that basically is there to protect them. And in some cases, to protect them from each other. Matthew Lyon and I forget his first name, Griswold was his last name. Matthew Lyon was the state representative from Vermont, and Griswold was the state representative from Connecticut. And Lyon on the floor of the House of Representatives in 1790, I forget the year, anyhow, in the 1790s, Matthew Lyon stood up and said to Griswold, this was 1799, actually, because this was, or 1798. This was right after the Alien Sedition Act was passed. Lyon says to Griswold, you, sir, are only defending the interests of the rich. Griswold grabs a poker out of the fireplace on the floor of Congress and runs over and hits Matthew Lyon with it. They get in a fist fight on the floor of the House. Who breaks it up? The sergeant at arms, the Capitol Police. Not the Capitol Police, in quotes. That's literally a legal entity, but the Congress's police. So that's basically what they've got. They've got that police force. That police force is not going to go out and get Don McGahn. So what happens? What happens when the Supreme Court orders the president to allow his people to testify? And he says no. Now, this has happened 3 times in our history. And twice it was done and let me just lay this out for you. Twice it was done by a president whose picture is hanging next to Donald Trump as he sits at his desk in the Oval Office. That's Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson, when John Marshall ruled that Andrew Jackson could not do the Trail of Tears, Andrew Jackson said, John Marshall's made his decision, let him enforce it, knowing that the Supreme Court doesn't have a police force. They couldn't stop him. And Andrew Jackson was the commander-in-chief of the military, and he said, go ahead. He said to the Army, take those Indians from Georgia and march them to Oklahoma. And they did. And then 2 years later, the Supreme Court said to Andrew Jackson, you may not shut down the Second National Bank of the United States. That's for Congress. That's not your purview. Congress created that. You can't do that. And Andrew Jackson did it anyway. which led to the deepest and longest depression in the history of the United States, but he did it anyway. And then the other side, so there's two examples. There was a president that is Donald Trump's hero who did not respect the Constitution or the authority of the Supreme Court. And there was nothing anybody could do about it. And people died because of it. The Indians from Georgia, the Cherokee. The third time this has happened was in 1861 when Abraham Lincoln was sworn into office. And he said, you know, that decision of the Supreme Court in 1858, Dred Scott, Roger Taney, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, ruled that in every state in the Union, people of color are property, not humans. And I'm not going to respect that. We're not going to respect that. And the President of the United States defied the Supreme Court. And what happened? A half a dozen states in the South said, the president is out of control. The president is lawless. Our country is falling apart. This is a crisis. We are withdrawing from the Union. And we fought a civil war, and 600,000 Americans died. Now, you know, maybe there are other examples that I don't know of, but those are the only two that come to mind. So what happens if Congress starts an impeachment hearing and says, okay, McGahn, and it could be anybody, you know, it could be tax returns, it could be whatever. I'm just using Don McGahn as a for example. They start an impeachment hearing, and they say, Don McGahn, you have to testify now. This is an official impeachment hearing. The Constitution provides for this. We now have judicial power. Stand before us and speak. And McGahn says, no, the president told me not to. And Congress goes to the Supreme Court and says, hold him in contempt of Congress. And the Supreme Court says, okay, Don McGahn, you're in contempt of Congress. Now, what's the penalty for contempt of Congress? You get thrown in jail until you're not in contempt, until you comply. And so the Supreme Court says to Donald Trump, the guy who controls the police power of the United States, please have Don McGahn arrested and thrown in jail. And Donald Trump says to the Supreme Court the same thing Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln said to the Supreme Court, stuff it. Ain't going to do it. At that point, have we ceased to be a functioning republic? I have an article that raises these questions. It's all over the internet. You can find it on Alternet or Raw Story or Truthdig or Common Dreams, you know, about the parallels between what we're going through right now and what Rome went through at the end of their republic. I mean, this is literally how the Roman Republic died. The country of Rome continued. The empire of Rome continued for another 1,400 years. Rome didn't fall until 1453 when Constantinople was sacked. But it ceased to be a republic around 30 or 40 BC with the assassination of Caesar and the starting of the triumvirate and all that kind of stuff. Because basically the rule of law no longer stood. People didn't respect the institutions of the republic. They respected who had the strongest army. It became a nation of warlords. Neither the Capitol Police nor the Secret Service, I mean, they both answer to the president. I get it. The Sergeant-at-Arms in the House answers to Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell. And there you may have a little bit of dissonance. What happens if Nancy Pelosi says, well, if Don McGahn wanders into the Capitol building, please arrest him. And Mitch McConnell says to the Capitol, to the Sergeant-at-Arms, if Don McGahn wanders into the Capitol building, please release him. I mean, you can see where this is going. And Trump has clearly war-gamed this thing out, Trump and Barr. And they've decided that they're not answerable to anybody, that they're going to turn the United States into a strongman form of government rather than a small d democratic, small r republic. They're going to use the model of Orban in Hungary, who, by the way, visited the White House last week and was praised by Donald Trump for shutting down the press in Hungary and imprisoning his political prisoners. We're going to go the way of Turkey with Erdogan. We're going to go the way of the Philippines with Duterte. We're going to go the way of Brazil with Bolsonaro. Is that what we're looking at? What are our options?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I mean, what if even there's a final impeachment vote and they say impeach the guy and he says, no, I'm not going to do that? Where do we go from there? And welcome back. Carolyn in Gustine, California. If I'm saying that right, Carolyn, what's on your mind?
Yep. Hi, Tom. How are you doing? Hope
Good.
You're doing well.
Thank you.
It seems like the problem that we're having right now is that we have all of the elements in play in the people that are going out to do the protests. But the problem is the only thing that we seem to only think we were allowed to do is protesting. And I don't understand why we are following some of those particular rules when almost every time something changes happens because we've stopped following the rules because we know the rules are broken. If we use the models of the cooperatives aligning with all of the protesters that are out there right now and start to figure out how all of the laws are being written by external lobbyists, they're not even being written by our representatives any longer. We start breaking up all these little things state by state by state of all the different bad things that are happening and start to figure out how we can rewrite them so that it actually is for the people. That's a different way of using the people power, of rebuilding our foundation from the ground up instead of just following the rules, because we know that the rules can be broken just by looking at, the president right now.
So I'm not sure I understood a specific suggestion in there, Carolyn.
Well, I think what I'm trying to say is that we have a lot of the groups already in place. It started with the Occupy group, who was actually looking at a lot of the problems of the country.
No, I get all that. Let's say tomorrow morning 5 million people showed up in the streets, which would be huge. I mean, we've never had. I think the biggest in the history of the United States was around 3 or 4 million. Let's say tomorrow 5 million people showed up in the streets and said, Trump, you have to allow Don McGahn to testify. And Trump says no. What do we do?
Actually, I'm not talking about going into the streets to protest against Don McGahn or anybody, because they're actually the...
Going into the streets to do what then?
No, I'm talking about going into groups, individual groups, and looking at all of our local governing laws, looking at how our schools are being governed by the type of people that are doing the privatizing of our school system, rewriting the education system, looking at the laws, trying to figure out what laws are actually...
These are all really important things to do, Carolyn, once we have a functioning republic again. But right now, we are in a constitutional crisis. We've got a president of the United States who is claiming that he is above the law, that he does not have to follow the law, that when a judge orders him to follow the law, that he doesn't have to do that because that judge was appointed by Barack Obama. This is not normal.
That's true. Well, no, that's definitely not normal. But the problem that we're having is we're waiting until 2020 thinking that everything is going to be good if everybody votes. But the problem is only half of the country is voting. So you're literally only engaging a quarter of each side.
Right.
You've got close to 50% of the people who don't even engage any longer because they know the system is broken. If you fix the system, they'll get engaged again. If you make them involved in fixing the system, they'll get engaged again. Use the co-op model. Try to start rebuilding everything simultaneously while you're going out to protest. We can chew gum and walk at the same time.
Well, and there are a lot of people doing that. I mean, there's a lot of activity toward good government. I think it's remarkable how many of the Democratic candidates for president right now are refusing to take corporate PAC money and things like that. I think it's up to like 8 or 9 of them. Those are all good things. But I'm not sure that, and I get the overall concept, and I'm totally supportive of it. But for this crisis at this moment, there's important and there's urgent, and I think this is actually both, which is the rare confluence. Carolyn, thank you for the call, and thank you for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email. every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com, and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. More information is available at patreon.com/TomHartmann. That's patreon.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Dennis in Bergenfield, New Jersey. Hey, Dennis, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how's it going?
Good.
So, yeah, you've been talking a lot today about how Trump's, been abusing his power, and this leads us back to our conversation about the Fed. Could you explain how the Fed is, the negatives are of the Fed's regional banks being owned by for-profit private banks, and how making the Fed part of the Treasury would solve this problem?
It won't solve this problem, Dennis, and it's got nothing to do with it. Paul in Kirkland, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Let me digress a little bit, not to be wonkish about the Trail of Tears. Well, I think maybe you did point out that this was Andrew Jackson defying John Marshall, not Roger
That's correct.
Taney.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, but to not to make a correction, but remember, this was the Trail of Tears. The Worcester versus Georgia case was in 1832. And the reason I'm getting wonkish about this is that...
This wandered into the next presidential administration.
The next presidential administration was Andrew Jackson. He was reelected.
Oh, okay.
So he even defied the Supreme Court.
Right, okay. Thank you.
And then, this is the point, is that we're very much in this sort of situation where the president defies the Supreme Court, yet he's reelected, and then he appointed Roger Taney in the last year of his presidency. And Roger Taney was one of the worst things that ever happened to this country.
Right.
The Second National Bank, he also defied John Marshall's decision, but not just John Marshall, the Supreme Court, the majority of the Supreme Court. In 1819, the Second U.S. National Bank, the state of Maryland, tried to tax it out of existence, and the court said you couldn't do that, and established what do we call it, presumed powers of Congress.
Paul, we have less than a minute before we hit a hard break here. You want to make your point?
Yeah, I think what the problem is, if we're not going to get anything out of this. We're not going to see the Mueller report. We're not going to until we go into impeachment. And if the Congress doesn't exercise its power, it risks losing it. We will get an impeachment hearings, but we'll also get a trial. And even in the Senate, if there's not a conviction, the trial will not be like the Senate hearings where the Republicans like Lindsey Graham stand up and flail their arms. This will be an actual proceeding that John Roberts will preside over, and then we'll get real facts to come out. Then it will be up to the real power in this country, hopefully, is the people. And that's what we should have had. We should never have been in this position. We shouldn't have been in this position for the last 20 years. There should have never been a George W. Bush. There should have never been an Iraq war and the waste of $6 trillion. And there should never have been a Donald Trump. The people who have the power are us, and we need to start stepping up.
Okay. A nice optimistic perspective, Paul. Yes, impeachment is a solution and may well be the only solution outside of an election. But then, you've got to have Donald Trump both honor the will of the Senate or honor the will of the people. I'm not so sure about either one, but we'll see.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls right after this. We're reading today from the Mueller report. This is page 45. It's the section is titled "The GRU." That's the intelligence unit inside the Russian government. The GRU's transfer of stolen material to WikiLeaks. Both the GRU and WikiLeaks sought to hide their communications, which has limited the office's ability to collect all of the communications between them. Thus, although it is clear that the stolen DNC and Podesta documents were transferred from the GRU to WikiLeaks, and then the rest of the page is blacked out by Bill Barr. Page 46. The office was able to identify when the GRU, operating through its personas Guccifer 2.0 and DC Leaks, transferred some of the stolen documents to WikiLeaks through online archives set up by the GRU. Assange had access to the internet from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, England. And then there's a paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. On July 14, 2016, GRU officers used a Guccifer 2.0 email account to send WikiLeaks an email bearing the subject Big Archive and the message A New Attempt. The email contained an encrypted attachment with the name WKDNC link1.text.gpg. Using the Guccifer 2.0 Twitter account, GRU officers sent WikiLeaks an encrypted file and instructions on how to open it. On July 18, 2016, WikiLeaks confirmed in a direct message to the Guccifer 2.0 account that it had, quote, the 1 gig or so archive, end quote, that would make a release of the stolen documents, quote, this week. On July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks released over 20,000 emails and other documents stolen from the DNC computer networks. The Democratic National Convention began 3 days later. Similar communications occurred between WikiLeaks and the GRU-operated person's DC Leaks. On September 15, 2016, DC Leaks wrote to WikiLeaks, "Hi there, I'm from DC Leaks. How could we discuss some submission-related issues? I'm trying to reach out to you via your secured chat, but getting no response. I've got something that might interest you. You won't be disappointed, I promise." The WikiLeaks account responded, "Hi there," without further elaboration. The DC Leaks account did not respond immediately. That same day, the Twitter account, Guccifer2, sent DC Leaks a direct message, which is the first known contact between the personas. During subsequent communications, going to page 47, Guccifer 2.0 persona informed DC Leaks that WikiLeaks was trying to contact DC Leaks and arrange for a way to speak through encrypted emails. An analysis of the metadata collected from the WikiLeaks site revealed that the stolen Podesta emails show a creation date of September 19, 2016. Based on information about Assange's computer and its possible operating system, this date may be when the GRU staged the stolen Podesta emails for transfer to WikiLeaks, as the GRU had previously done in July 2016 for the DNC emails. The WikiLeaks site also released PDFs and other documents taken from Podesta that were attachments to emails in his account. These documents had a creation date of October 2nd, 2016, which appears to be the date the attachments were separately staged by WikiLeaks on its site. Beginning on September 20, 2016, WikiLeaks and DC Leaks resumed communications in a brief exchange. On September 22nd, 2016, a DC Leaks email account, dcleaksproject@gmail.com, sent an email to a WikiLeaks account with the subject submission and the message "Hi from DC Leaks." The email contained a PGP encrypted message with the file name wiki_mail.txt.gpg. Next sentence is blacked out by Bill Barr. The email, however, bears a number of similarities to the July 14, 2016 email in which GRU officers used the Guccifer 2.0 persona to give WikiLeaks access to the archive of DNC files. On September 22, 2016, the same day of DC Leaks' email to WikiLeaks, the Twitter account @DCLeaks sent a single message to @WikiLeaks with a string of characters, and then the rest of that paragraph is blacked out by Bill Barr. The office cannot rule out that stolen documents were transferred to WikiLeaks through intermediaries who visited during the summer of 2016. For example, public reporting identified Andrew Muller-Maghun as a WikiLeaks associate who may have assisted with the transfer of these stolen documents to WikiLeaks. And then the rest of page 47 is redacted by Bill Barr. Page 48, first paragraph is redacted by Bill Barr. On October 7, 2016, WikiLeaks released the first email stolen from the Podesta email account. In total, WikiLeaks released 33 tranches of stolen emails between October 7, 2016 and November 7, 2016. The releases included private speeches given by Clinton, internal communications between Podesta and other high-ranking members of the Clinton campaign, and correspondence related to the Clinton Foundation. In total, WikiLeaks released over 50,000 documents stolen from Podesta's personal email account. The last in time email released from Podesta's account was dated March 21, 2016, 2 days after Podesta received a spear phishing email sent by the GRU. D. WikiLeaks statement dissembling about the source of stolen materials. As reports attributing the DNC and DCCC hacks to the Russian government emerged, WikiLeaks and Assange made several public statements apparently designed to obscure the source of the materials that WikiLeaks was releasing. The file transfer, evidence described above, and other information uncovered during the investigation discredit WikiLeaks' claims about the source of the material that it posted. Beginning in the summer of 2016, Assange and WikiLeaks made a number of statements about Seth Rich, a former DNC staff member who was killed in July of 2016. The statements about... I may be coming to your city soon on our book tour for The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. I'll be in New York, Washington, D.C., Portland, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and Minneapolis. Here I come. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. By the way, it's the Stop the Ban Day at noon. Of course, it's 1 o'clock on the East Coast now, or 1:30, 1:34. It is in the noon hour in the central time zone right now. People are gathering in principally centers of government, town halls and things like that, but all over the country. People are gathering to protest these bans on abortion. StopAbortionBans.org is the website if you want to find out where a protest is happening near you. An hour from now, they'll be happening in the Mountain Time Zone, and in 2 hours from now, in a half hour, they'll be starting in the Mountain Time Zone, and then an hour after that, they'll be starting in the Pacific Time Zone, just FYI. So anyhow, back to our conversation. Nicholas in Sheridan, Illinois. Hey, Nicholas, what's up?
Hi, thank you so much once again, Professor, taking my call. I have a little bit of background in, the social sciences, political sciences, and history and such, and I've seen this coming for a while, and it's a little bit frustrating. Starting back with the previous election, my dream ticket was Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, and I tried to suggest that the only person or team that could actually beat Trump, just because of the circumstances, might have been.
Yeah, but this isn't that election, Nicholas, and we're not talking about the election. So
okay, but what I'm saying is that I couldn't get a word in edgewise or anybody listening to it. So what I'm saying this time is that don't take for granted that we're even going to have elections to be able to vote everybody out, is what I'm saying. There's got to be, everybody has to be prepared for the possibility that things aren't going to, carry on as, the status quo. So what are we going to do if that whole process is interrupted and there's so much chaos in this country and internationally? What are we going to do if we don't have a satisfactory election?
Yeah, Nicholas, 6 months ago or a year ago, I would have said, Nicholas, you're being paranoid. Today, I'm saying, Nicholas, you may damn well be right, and it concerns me tremendously. And it's another one, it's another dimension of this stuff that we really need to have a conversation about. What do we do when Trump crosses the next line? But I'm concerned right now about what do we do with his having crossed this line, which is he's defying the power and authority of Congress, and he controls the police powers in this country, not Congress and not the courts. So no matter what the courts say, no matter what Congress says, he's not going to throw any of his own people in jail. So Nicholas, point taken. Kelly in Berkeley. Hey, Kelly, what's up?
Hi, Kelly. Hi. Thank you for covering climate yesterday. My husband and I were in Greece in 1991, August 18th and 19th, when the coup began in the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. And by December 25th, the Soviet Union was dissolved. And when Trump was elected, I thought, this could be the end of the United States. This could be the beginning of the breakup. How that would occur or not, I don't have any ideas, but it just seems like with each step, we're getting closer.
I think this is the analogy in this article that I wrote a couple of days ago, and that's now been published all across the internet. You can find it right now probably most easily over at Common Dreams or Truth Dig. It was on Alternate and Raw Story, comparing the United States to Rome. And the point that I made is that, which is a little different than the point that you're making, Kelly, is that Rome existed for over 2,000 years. In fact, Rome, the Republic of Rome, or the Roman Empire, still exists. It's called the Holy Roman Catholic Church, but that's the vestige of it. But the official country ceased to exist in 1453 when the walls of Constantinople were breached. But Rome had not been a republic since the AD 30s, or the BC 30s rather, when Julius Caesar was knifed, was stabbed to death by Brutus and his buddies. And arguably had ceased to be a republic as much as 50 years before that, when Roman legislators basically stopped respecting the rule of law, but it continued to be a country. So it's entirely possible for the United States not to break up like the Soviet Union did, but rather to simply change its form of government, which is what Russia did. Russia went from being a communist government to being a democracy, and using capitalism, and then that capitalism essentially co-opted the democracy and turned it into a kind of a semi-autocracy, semi-kleptocracy, a strongman form of government. And it looks to me like that's exactly what's happening here. Which makes me wonder, and this is, by the way, happening all over the world. We saw this happen to Hungary with the election of Viktor Orban. We saw this happen in Turkey with Erdogan. We saw this happen in Poland. I can't remember or pronounce the guy's name who's the president of Poland. In every case, they basically overturned or just started ignoring their own constitutional checks and balances and declared themselves strongmen. And it's largely what has happened in Russia. It's what's happened in the Philippines with Duterte. It's what's happened in Brazil with Jair Bolsonaro. And so if Trump stands up and says, "I am not going to respect the rule of law," which is what he's saying right now, and his attorney general is saying, "And I'm not going to enforce the laws, and I'm in charge of all the police," we are just not going to do it. Sorry, we're not going to play. We're not going to participate. We're not going to play this game of democracy anymore. We are in charge. We have the power. Congress, you can't even appropriate money for a wall. I'm going to take it from the military. That kind of thing. I share your concern, Kelly, about the possible breakup of our country. That happened once before in 1860, in part because a president, Abraham Lincoln, refused to acknowledge a Supreme Court order. Roger Taney's, or the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision. But I don't think that we're going to break up. I do worry that we're going to cease to be a democratic republic. Am I making sense, Kelly?
Well, of course you're making sense. I just think about California being, what is it now, the 6th largest economy in the world.
Yes.
And are these states going to continue to go along with this? Maybe for a while, but I wouldn't see them going along forever, basically.
Well, you've got fewer than 30% of the population of the United States controls more than 50% of the Senate. California is kind of out of luck in that department. You have 2 senators for 30 million people, or whatever the population, 28 million. And, Vermont has 2 senators for 600,000 people, or Wyoming, for 800,000 people. So, but we're wandering far afield. Kelly, thank you. Thank you for your call and for your contribution to the conversation. David in Woodland Hills, California. Hey, David, what's up?
This is why your topic today is so critically important, number 2 behind global warming. You said you couldn't see inside Trump's mind. I can. Trump is like O.J. He will never give up, because giving up means going to jail, and Trump don't do jail. All of their lives, they were both privileged, O.J. athletically, Trump financially, and so they got away with stuff that nobody else could get away with. We're dealing with O.J. again. And if I may say one more thing, I have no doubt the investigators may have crossed a line or two in the Mueller investigation, as investigators far too often do. I also have no doubt Trump not only crossed the line decades ago, he obliterated it.
Yeah. I think the guy's a mafia boss, and I think he's been engaged in money laundering with foreign governments forever, and I think he may well be putting the interests of other foreign governments ahead of our own. And I'm not just talking about Russia. And I'll give you all that. But, the crisis that we're dealing with right now is if Trump continues to say, no, I'm not going to give you anything, I'm not going to let anybody testify, even in the face of an impeachment hearing, even in the face of an order from the Supreme Court, What do we do?
I wish I knew. I'll tell you two more things. Back in the 70s, some commentators said that the country most likely to become Nazi Germany, the next Nazi Germany, is the United States, and I thought he was nuts. And the other thing is Alvin Toffler, in his book After Future Shock, predicted the United States would break up. California, Washington, Oregon would be Pacificopia or something, and Texas, Mexico would be Texaco. And
no, I'm familiar with that, and there were several books that came out during that time. Also, the Seven Nations of America and others. I get that, but David, we're going far afield here. I really don't think that. So anyway, David, thank you for the call. Another David in Chicago. David, I'm sorry, we're a little less than a minute here. Real quick comment, please.
If Trump is not elected, he won't be president after noon on January 20th, 2021.
Right.
So the new president will be the commander-in-chief. So he's going to have to leave.
Right. So how do we put our republic back together? How do we say to that new president, you can't behave the way the last one did?
Well, we're assuming that the new president will be a Democrat, and most of them are decent people.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, up until this point, our country has functioned as a functioning republic, not because politicians are afraid of the law, not because politicians are afraid that they're going to get thrown in jail, but because they respect the institution. They respect they took seriously, thank you, David, for the call, they took seriously their oath to uphold the Constitution, because presidents took seriously their oath to faithfully execute the laws of the United States. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're going to check in with Talk Media News in 4 minutes, find out what's going on in the world. We'll continue this conversation right after the top of the hour. Stick around. And welcome back. Bill in Berwick, Pennsylvania. Hey, Bill, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Hi, Tom. First time calling.
Thank you.
I like your book club a lot and everything, when you read from books and things. And usually when you're doing your presentation, I listen a lot. When people, ironically, I suppose, when people begin to call in, I tend to tune out. And I'll just leave it at that. But I happened to catch you today on Free Speech, and you were basically coming to the end game there, where we were speaking about no, 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 and no. Or Pelosi says, arrest, and McDonald says, release. And ultimately, all laws, no matter who's making them, everything comes down to physical accountability. Someone robs a bank, the reason that things work is because ultimately someone can throw that person physically in incarceration. Without that last step, it's all moot. It's all
right. The end point is essentially physical violence, or the threat of it.
Right, or the threat of. I mean, look at Nixon. He was responsible for, 22,000 American soldiers being killed, and you can make a case for another 20-some thousand on the other side, and then probably another 20,000 that were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And, Johnson knew about it ahead of time, when he sabotaged the peace talks. So if ever there was a case to incarcerate somebody, it would be him. But, of course, he wasn't even impeached. He was threatened, resigned, and he was left alone.
Right.
Wealth and power.
Which is what I think Trump ultimately wants, by the way. I think that, I think the end game, to the extent that I can look inside Donald Trump's mind, and I'm not even pretending to be able to do that, broadly speaking, but to the extent that I might imagine that I can, I'm thinking that he never really wanted to be president. He never expected to be president. And he would be very, very happy to do the Richard Nixon thing, that is to resign, go back to running his business, start building his hotels in authoritarian countries all over the world, but make sure that Mike Pence, coming in behind him, not only pardons him, but pardons his entire crime family.
Well, sure. I mean, you're right. He was accidentally president, but he thought, hey, I can get a nice financial kick. I'll be absolved of any crimes I've done with my foreign connections, just shall we say, leave it at that. And on and on we go. I mean, if you want to look at the core, I'm sort of writing a book about how to change the world, which is obviously a rather small undertaking. But so I don't want to go into a lot of things, ideas. But concentrated wealth is your problem. I mean, once you define a world based on the currency construct, which has no, because it's tied to math, it has no upper limit, and we basically said, here's a construct, you get this one thing, you can get anything, and by the way, there's no
But you're not going to change anything that has to do with how our economy functions or how our value system functions in the next 6 months or the next year and a half.
No, God, no. I'm just saying that in terms of we're in the end game now for a lot of reasons, for population,
I think
for climate, so resources, and so on. But I'm saying in terms of to go back right to your point where I caught your show, where you basically were running up the what happens if everybody says no. The Republicans, the Democrats, that's all just a puppet show controlled basically by the same hands of concentrated wealth. Yes, there's some different views and some slants vary, but it all stops. They all know
that logic, Bill, leads you to screw it. I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to pay attention. I'm not going to participate, and then they win.
Well, yeah, but as you yourself were saying, and as some of your callers said on what happens if all this goes through, but nobody pays attention, and what ultimately has to happen in any system is that if the institutions that have been entrusted by the people fail to go to the end point, then the people themselves have to do, unfortunately, the dirty business of the day. And I'm not going to go any further than that because it would be appropriate.
Well, let's not go any further than that. Bill, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, new book by Ellen Ratner that, available in bookstores near you, all that kind of thing. I'm trying to put Luke Vargas on the line, but I think he's talking to Joyce. I'm not sure why. She's on the phone with him. We will, we will talk to Luke in a moment here. Nope. There we go. Okay, now I can put him on the air. Hey, Luke.
Hi, Tom.
Hey. So thank you so much for being with us today. And first of all, if I may break with my normal tradition of following the issues that you've been following, if Trump continues to defy Congress, and if the Supreme Court says, Don McGahn, you're in contempt of Congress, you go to jail, and they say to Bill Barr, arrest Don McGahn and put him in jail, and Bill Barr says, no, I'm not going to do that. What next?
Well, I mean, the Sergeant at Arms, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Sergeant at Arms can't operate outside the building.
There you go. Well, I don't know where we find ourselves. I would encourage everyone to go back and to look at an article that was written by Kurt Bardella in The Atlantic. He was an advisor to the House Oversight Committee from 2009 to 2013. And he was writing in The Atlantic last month basically saying we wouldn't have let Obama get away with this. And he was working for the Republicans as they were subpoenaing all these Obama officials when they voted to hold Eric Holder in contempt for not giving over documents related to that alleged gun running.
After he'd given over a million documents and appeared before Congress 7 times to testify.
Right. Well, of course. But anyway, so he says, look, he uses the language that Republicans use to try and condemn the Obama administration for all these what they claim to be sort of, ignoring, Congress's subpoena power, and says it's not okay that Republicans are not standing up and using the same arguments now to defend the role of Congress here. And I wonder if this is, again, not one of those instances that Congress will come to regret. We've seen a little bit of norm busting in the past few months. With the emergency declaration, which gives the White House all of this power to just sort of set policy regardless of what Congress wants.
Reallocate funds.
Right. It's just not. If we do set a brazen new precedent of the executive branch just walling itself off from Congress, when, Democrats are in Congress and a Republican is in the White House. Where do we find ourselves when the story flips? I doubt you'll have much remorse from Republicans when they're once again in the minority and, it's President Kamala Harris or whatever. But perhaps the executive branch, if the Supreme Court ruling comes and helps them out, will be further empowered to be able to just operate independently. I still don't think that is a type of point scoring.
I think the end game on
this for this country.
I think the end game on this is the same end game that we saw played out in Hungary. We saw it played out in Poland. We saw it played out in the Philippines. We just saw now it's played out in Brazil, and that is that a democratic republic form of government becomes a strongman form of government.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm not terribly optimistic about the White House bowing to even a federal court ruling demanding that they hand over documents or produce witnesses.
Right, and if they don't, I mean, the point that I made earlier in the program is, twice Andrew Jackson, whose picture hangs next to Donald Trump every day in the Oval Office, twice Andrew Jackson said to the Supreme Court, screw you, I'm not going to do what you said. Supreme Court said no Trail of Tears. He said, tough luck. And he did the Trail of Tears, and he got reelected. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't shut down the Second National Bank. He shut down the Second National Bank. It created a huge depression, but hey, he ignored the Supreme Court. And then the only other time I know of that this has happened, maybe there are others, was when Abraham Lincoln said, I'm not going to enforce Dred Scott. I'm not going to do what the Supreme Court said. We're not going to acknowledge that ruling. And that led directly to the Civil War.
Yeah, it gives me tremendous pause, and I think your connections specifically to Hungary and Poland are quite apt and ones that people should look up as a model of how this country could end up. That's I think, right on point.
Do you want to speak to one of those, Luke?
I'm afraid I probably am not equipped to do so terribly eloquently on such short notice.
Then let's talk about Iran. The nuclear officials in Iran, now this is Iran itself saying we have quadrupled our uranium enrichment capacity. Capacity is a different thing from what you actually have. Is this basically them, doing a little chest thumping here?
Yeah, they're allowed to produce enriched uranium up to 3.67% enrichment, which is enough to use in power plants far, far below weapons grade or even medium grade.
Weapons grade requires over 90%, as I recall.
Yeah, and then medium grade starts at around 20, which is still concerning for other reasons, but not, it would slow down, it would increase the breakout, or slow down rather the breakout time to a weapon, but it's still not much of a problem. I guess what we should really be watching here is to see how an effort to try and persuade particularly Europe to tweak some of the provisions of this deal and to cut some financial breaks to Iran. That's, I think, what this threat is about. Let's see how it's spun in Washington. I've spoken to some nuclear experts today, arms control experts, who say, yes, what Iran is threatening to do here is a violation of the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, but it does not pose a near-term proliferation rate, that Iran is still so far away from breaking out to a nuclear weapon, from operating heavy water reactors, or some of the other things that it's sort of provoking around, that if this is spun as Iran is racing to a weapon, then we should just be on the lookout. That is a big manipulation of what the underlying facts here. What we should be concerned about is a July 7th deadline. That's when Iran says if it doesn't have any new economic provisions given to it by Europe to, facilitate trade and specifically international oil sales, then it will start enriching uranium at a higher level capacity, and that is more concerning. But we still have a few months before we get there. Europe has a few more cards on its table, but again, I'm just setting everyone up for the inevitable Fox headline today that says this is a nuclear threat. As of today, it is not, but keep watching that.
Yeah, and if after July 7th they start enriching and then Israel takes out a couple of their nuclear plants, as has happened in the past, then we're in really, really dangerous territory. Luke, thanks so much. Good talking with you.
Thank you, Tom.
Luke Vargas with Talk Media News. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. We're reading today from the Mueller report. This is page 45. It's the section is titled "The GRU." That's the intelligence unit inside the Russian government. The GRU's transfer of stolen material to WikiLeaks. Both the GRU and WikiLeaks sought to hide their communications, which has limited the office's ability to collect all of the communications between them. Thus, although it is clear that the stolen DNC and Podesta documents were transferred from the GRU to WikiLeaks, and then the rest of the page is blacked out by Bill Barr. Page 46. The office was able to identify when the GRU, operating through its personas Guccifer 2.0 and DC Leaks, transferred some of the stolen documents to WikiLeaks through online archives set up by the GRU. Assange had access to the internet from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, England. And then there's a paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. On July 14, 2016, GRU officers used a Guccifer 2.0 email account to send WikiLeaks an email bearing the subject Big Archive and the message A New Attempt. The email contained an encrypted attachment with the name WKDNC link1.text.gpg. Using the Guccifer 2.0 Twitter account, GRU officers sent WikiLeaks an encrypted file and instructions on how to open it. On July 18, 2016, WikiLeaks confirmed in a direct message to the Guccifer 2.0 account that it had, quote, the 1 gig or so archive, end quote, that would make a release of the stolen documents, quote, this week. On July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks released over 20,000 emails and other documents stolen from the DNC computer networks. The Democratic National Convention began 3 days later. Similar communications occurred between WikiLeaks and the GRU-operated person's DC Leaks. On September 15, 2016, DC Leaks wrote to WikiLeaks, "Hi there, I'm from DC Leaks. How could we discuss some submission-related issues? I'm trying to reach out to you via your secured chat, but getting no response. I've got something that might interest you. You won't be disappointed, I promise." The WikiLeaks account responded, "Hi there," without further elaboration. The DC Leaks account did not respond immediately. That same day, the Twitter account, Guccifer2, sent DC Leaks a direct message, which is the first known contact between the personas. During subsequent communications, going to page 47, Guccifer 2.0 persona informed DC Leaks that WikiLeaks was trying to contact DC Leaks and arrange for a way to speak through encrypted emails. An analysis of the metadata collected from the WikiLeaks site revealed that the stolen Podesta emails show a creation date of September 19, 2016. Based on information about Assange's computer and its possible operating system, this date may be when the GRU staged the stolen Podesta emails for transfer to WikiLeaks, as the GRU had previously done in July 2016 for the DNC emails. The WikiLeaks site also released PDFs and other documents taken from Podesta that were attachments to emails in his account. These documents had a creation date of October 2nd, 2016, which appears to be the date the attachments were separately staged by WikiLeaks on its site. Beginning on September 20, 2016, WikiLeaks and DC Leaks resumed communications in a brief exchange. On September 22nd, 2016, a DC Leaks email account, dcleaksproject@gmail.com, sent an email to a WikiLeaks account with the subject submission and the message "Hi from DC Leaks." The email contained a PGP encrypted message with the file name wiki_mail.txt.gpg. Next sentence is blacked out by Bill Barr. The email, however, bears a number of similarities to the July 14, 2016 email in which GRU officers used the Guccifer 2.0 persona to give WikiLeaks access to the archive of DNC files. On September 22, 2016, the same day of DC Leaks' email to WikiLeaks, the Twitter account @DCLeaks sent a single message to @WikiLeaks with a string of characters, and then the rest of that paragraph is blacked out by Bill Barr. The office cannot rule out that stolen documents were transferred to WikiLeaks through intermediaries who visited during the summer of 2016. For example, public reporting identified Andrew Muller-Maghun as a WikiLeaks associate who may have assisted with the transfer of these stolen documents to WikiLeaks. And then the rest of page 47 is redacted by Bill Barr. Page 48, first paragraph, is redacted by Bill Barr. On October 7, 2016, WikiLeaks released the first email stolen from the Podesta email account. In total, WikiLeaks released 33 tranches of stolen emails between October 7, 2016 and November 7, 2016. The releases included private speeches given by Clinton, internal communications between Podesta and other high-ranking members of the Clinton campaign, and correspondence related to the Clinton Foundation. In total, WikiLeaks released over 50,000 documents stolen from Podesta's personal email account. The last in time email released from Podesta's account was dated March 21, 2016, 2 days after Podesta received a spear phishing email sent by the GRU. D. WikiLeaks statement dissembling about the source of stolen materials. As reports attributing the DNC and DCCC hacks to the Russian government emerged, WikiLeaks and Assange made several public statements apparently designed to obscure the source of the materials that WikiLeaks was releasing. The file transfer, evidence described above, and other information uncovered during the investigation discredit WikiLeaks' claims about the source of the material that it posted. Beginning in the summer of 2016, Assange and WikiLeaks made a number of statements about Seth Rich, a former DNC staff member who was killed in July of 2016. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We've been talking for the day, basically, about the possibility of the death of the Republic, or if not the death of the Republic, certainly an alteration of it. I am of the opinion, and I say this just right out loud in this op-ed piece that I've published that's on numerous websites. You can find it over at commondreams.org or on TruthDig, or it was on Alternate. I think I might have scrolled off by now. It was on Raw Story for a while. I think it's still there. That argues that our form of government has functioned for 240 years, more or less, because of goodwill. Because politicians respected the institutions that were created by the founders, that are established by our Constitution, that they respected those institutions of the legislative branch of government, the House and Senate, the executive branch of government, the president and the military, and all the agencies under the president, and the judiciary, the third branch of government. And that even though throughout the history of the United States, the judiciary, as Alexander Hamilton points out in Federalist Number 78, has neither the power of the sword nor the power of the purse. In other words, the courts can, all day long, they can say, you go to jail, you don't go to jail. But if some police agency, which is the second branch of government, not the third is the judiciary, without the executive branch of government saying, okay, fine, Joe Blow goes to jail, we'll go out and arrest him and we'll put him in our jail. Who runs the jails? The executive branch. It's pretty much the same in all states. Who makes the laws determining what laws are broken and what are not broken? The legislature. But the legislature doesn't have the power to throw people in jail. They have to go to the courts. This is what Jerry Nadler said this morning. He says, if Don McGahn is going to testify before our committee, the House Judiciary Committee, he is going to testify before our committee, even if we have to go to court. So you've got Article 1 branch, whose only police power is the sergeant at arms, basically, the Capitol Police, whose authority is largely limited to the buildings that Congress occupies. And their main job is to provide security, to protect members of Congress from, crazy people, political opponents, or from each other in some cases. So the Article 1 branch of government does not have police powers. The Article 3 branch of government does not have police powers. As I said, read Federalist 78. Alexander Hamilton brags about it because he was trying to sell us on the idea of a Supreme Court. The police powers lie with the executive branch, with the president. So let's play this out. Jerry Nadler says to the courts, and by the way, this is happening right now with the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee asking for Trump's tax returns. Trump said no. He took it to a district court. The district court said Trump is wrong. He has to turn over his tax returns. He has 7 days. Now Trump is appealing that. It's going to the D.C. Circuit. The chief judge of the D.C. Circuit, by the way, is a guy named Merrick Garland. Odds are the D.C. Circuit will say, nope, Trump, you got to turn over your taxes. Trump will then appeal that to the Supreme Court. And let's say the Supreme Court says, the law is unambiguous. You have to turn over your taxes. And Trump still says no. Or the Supreme Court says, Jerry Nadler's right. Don McGahn does have to testify. And Trump says, no, I'm not going to do it. And so then Jerry Nadler says, okay, Don McGahn, or your taxes, the company that's holding your taxes, or the IRS commissioner, they're in contempt of Congress. And he throws that to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, yep, they're in contempt of Congress. Put them in jail. Now, who puts them in jail? Bill Barr. The police functions of government are in the executive branch. Now, I get it. There's a lot of confused discussion around this because a lot of people who are under 50 years old right now in the United States never studied civics in school, ever since Reagan gutted civics out of our education. But this is how the three branches of government work, and only one of them has the power of guns, handcuffs, and jail cells, and that's the executive branch. That's Trump. And this is how, as Luke Vargas pointed out in the last hour, he said, you look at Hungary, you look at Poland. In both cases, you had a president. In Hungary, it was Viktor Orban. I can't remember the name of the guy in Poland. But, say what? Andrzej Duda. Thank you, Sean. Andrzej Duda in Poland. In both cases, you had presidents elected, democratically elected, in governments with, constitutions not that dissimilar from our own, who simply said, we're not going to respect the law. We're not going to do what the courts tell us to do. We're not going to do what the legislature says to do. And the court said, oh, well, put yourself in jail. And they said no. And those countries, Poland and Hungary now, have flipped from being democratic republics to being strongman, what you would call an autocracy. I'd call it a strongman form of government. This happened to Russia. This happened to the Philippines. This happened to, most recently, just months ago, to Brazil with Jair Bolsonaro. We're seeing this happen all over the world. Turkey with Erdogan, Egypt with al-Sisi. Country after country after country that was democratic, small d democratic, has become a strongman country because the executive branch is refusing to acknowledge the authority of the legislative or the judicial or both branches. So what happens? What do we do? What do we as citizens do? What do Democrats as a party and as a political force do? What do Republicans do? If Donald Trump says, no, not going to send anybody over to you, period. I don't care what the Supreme Court says. Just like Andrew Jackson said, the Supreme Court, John Marshall, the Chief Justice, said, you cannot do that Trail of Tears. That's unconstitutional. We have treaties with those Cherokees in Georgia. And Andrew Jackson said, screw you. I'm going to do it anyway. He ordered the Army to do it. The Army did what he said, not what the Supreme Court said. And he never was held to account for it. He did it again a couple of years later with the Second National Bank. Now, to the best of my knowledge, the only other time a president has absolutely openly defied the courts was Abraham Lincoln. He defied the Supreme Court in Dred Scott, in the Dred Scott decision, which said that in non-slave states, still people of color are not humans, they're property. And Lincoln said, we're not going to enforce that. And that led to a civil war. Is that the direction we're heading? I sure hope not. I mean, that would be the absolute worst outcome. Arguably worse than our flipping into a strongman form of government. So how does this play out? It seems to me the only two solutions that I see, and in both cases, America is going to be, every president in the future is going to look back and say, you know, I could do what Trump did. Whether on the left or the right. You get, you know, whether it's President Mike Pence or whether it's President Bernie Sanders, you know, saying, I don't care what Congress said. I don't care what the court said. I'm going to do what I want, what I think is right, because I believe it's the right thing. Has Trump fatally crippled our republic the way that Caesar and Julius Caesar and a couple of rulers preceding him, starting around 100 BC, fatally crippled the Roman Republic, and it simply ceased to become a republic. It was still Rome. It was still an empire. So, and then what happens if Congress says, okay, we're gonna pull out the big gun, we're gonna pull out the cannon, right? Nancy Pelosi, okay, do it. And Jerry Nadler says, okay, this hearing where we were looking into things, we're going to start looking into impeachment. We're going to call it an impeachment hearing. And now the Supreme Court is almost certainly going to say, yep, Trump, you've got to submit your taxes, or you've got to let Don McGahn testify, or whatever it may be. And even in the face of an impeachment hearing, Trump says, no, ain't going to do it. Then what happens? Then it's in the hands of the Republicans. Right? Then it's up to Mitch McConnell and Republicans in the Senate, because he'll be impeached by the House. The Democrats control enough votes in the House to impeach him, but you know he's got to be convicted in the Senate to be removed from office. Are the Republicans willing to do that? Particularly now that the billionaires who own the Republican Party pretty much have what they want. They got a guy in the White House who is changing the way that they calculate, that the EPA calculates how many people die from air pollution so that they can roll back air pollution regulations to make it more profitable for the fossil fuel billionaires. They've got just what they want in Donald Trump. And they don't, you know, and they look at our form of government and think, you know, it's a mess. It's terrible. You know, look at that. You got people on welfare. You shouldn't have welfare. You got Social Security. We shouldn't have Social Security. That's not in the Constitution. Medicare, are you kidding me? We need to do away with it. This is how these hardcore right-wing billionaires think. I mean, that's the platform David Koch ran for president on in 1980. So are the Republicans going to defy their billionaire owners? And if Trump is impeached and does leave office, will Mike Pence repair things? Or is Mike Pence going to continue to play strongman and bring on as his vice president somebody who's even crazier than Mike Pence? I mean, how far does this go? Or if the election happens in 2020, I mean, Nancy Pelosi talked about this. If he is not beat by a huge and decisive majority, what happens when he says, you know, yeah, sure, Kamala Harris became president, or Joe Biden became president, or Bernie Sanders became president, but only by 30 electoral votes. And I think that there was a bunch of illegal immigrants who were voting, and I'm not going to respect that. I'm going to stay right here in the White House. What do we do? Is this the end of the republic?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Or am I just being way over the top here? And, you know, hey, just chill out. It's all going to work out. What do you think? welcome back. Brian in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Brian, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I'm a union guy, and if things get that bad, say we go to war, or
you mean Trump starts a war with somebody in order to distract us from what's going on? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly what seems to be going on, and or if he defies the law with regard to staying in office, if he refuses to relinquish power, the people do have power. And that is, the first thing I would do is call in sick. I wouldn't participate in this country for anything. I wouldn't participate in any way, or as little as possible.
Brian, I'm guessing you're retired.
Just not go to work.
Are you working, Brian?
Well, I worked all my life. I'm retired now.
Yeah, so you know, no offense, Brian, but talk is cheap. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who, if they call in sick, don't get paid. In fact, the majority of the American workforce now, a little over half of the American workforce, no longer has any benefits whatsoever. They're not even technically employees.
But there's only a number of ways we can stand up, and this country's tied together by a whole corporate bureaucracy. And if that just fell for a few weeks, people would realize why it's happening and correct the situation.
Yeah, except I don't see it happening, Brian. I really don't.
I know most people don't, but that's what I would do.
Yeah. So you think a general strike is the way to do it? Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Brian. Thanks for your opinion. Laura in Lafayette, Colorado. Hey, Laura, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I too have, laid awake at night wondering if it sounds like a funny thing to do in the middle of the night, but if the Constitution is strong enough for all of this. And I've been thinking as I've been listening to the discussion that maybe it's time to think of something outside of the constitutional framework. For example, just in the way that we think about it, that thinking of Trump as a reality TV host whose show needs to be canceled rather than a president who needs to be removed. I just think of the other strongmen in the world. I think the one thing that gives me hope, and it's a kind of a dark thing to be hopeful about, is that Trump is such a weak person who has a lot of chinks in his armor and notices things like TV ratings and media coverage and the numbers of people in his inaugural crowd. Is there a way for Congress to perhaps exploit some of this by calling in people on these committees to talk about some of these chinks, rather than maybe the Mueller report?
Interesting theory. I don't know, Laura. I mean, you raise a really interesting question. I am concerned. I agree with you that Donald Trump is weak, and that's one of the things that concerns me the most. You know, a cornered rat is the most dangerous rat you'll ever find at their weakest point. So we'll see. Laura, thank you for the call. It's a good, thought-provoking question. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. Complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. With you, Peter in Chicago. Hey, Peter, it says you disagree with me. What about? What's up?
Hello, Tom. You asked the question just a minute ago, are you wrong and over the top? And the answer is unequivocally yes. For you to sit on this air and to pose the ifs and what abouts and maybe he did this, maybe he did that, without a fact on
it is not an if or a what about at all, Peter, to point out that Donald Trump has denied the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee.
So what, Tom?
Peter, you can't say so what when the president of the United States is defying the law, is breaking the law, openly breaking the law in front of all of us and sneering at us about it.
Obama did it too, Tom.
Obama never did this, Peter.
He did.
Never.
Eric Holder was in contempt of
Eric
Congress.
Holder was held in contempt of Congress because after 7 times he went before Congress and testified for hours after turning over 1 million documents to Congress. The Republicans on that committee decided that they wanted one more time to revisit Fast and Furious after that thing had been beaten to death, and Eric Holder said, fine, sue me. They did. It took a bunch of years. They ultimately won. But this has got nothing to do with that. Barack Obama was not defying the law. He was respecting the law.
Here's the problem. You gin up your callers. You've had 3 callers calling in talking about a war within the country. You're putting the idea that Trump's not going to leave office if he loses. The only ones I know.
I'm not putting that idea out. Trump talked about that in his rally last night.
Oh, please.
He did. He said, hey, I'm thinking maybe we shouldn't,
Yeah, Tom.
Oh, no,
okay, so
I'm sorry.
A little joke on the side. You can't.
Yeah, a little joke on the side. I'm sorry. When the president of the United States, after telling 10,000 lies, starts joking about not leaving office, that's not a joke,
The
Peter.
only ones who haven't given up their idea of leaving office are the Democrats, because you still can't deal with the fact that he beat Hillary. And
Peter, Donald Trump is guilty of numerous crimes. We know that. He was colluding with foreign powers enthusiastically to become president. They helped him become president. He covered it up. He ordered his lawyers to lie before Congress, and they did. One of his lawyers is sitting in jail right now for hiding the fact that Donald Trump, throughout the entire campaign, while he was telling all of us in the United States, all of the citizens, including you, Peter, who voted for him, while he was telling all of us, I got no business in Russia, I got nothing to do with the Russians. In fact, in the background, he was negotiating for Trump Tower Moscow that he thought was going to bring him $300 million. He lied to you, Peter. He lied to me. He lied to all of us.
Cohen's in jail for tax issues.
This has nothing to do with tax. Oh, God, Peter, I'm astonished. We'll be back. It's 27 minutes past the hour. Wow. So what do we do? How do you deal with a lawless president? And how do you wake up your fellow citizens who think, hey, it's just fine. Everybody does it. Obama did it, didn't he? How do you deal with that?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls right after this. It's 28 minutes past the hour. We're reading today from the Mueller report. This is page 45. It's the section is titled the GRU. That's the intelligence unit inside the Russian government. The GRU's transfer of stolen material to WikiLeaks. Both the GRU and WikiLeaks sought to hide their communications, which has limited the office's ability to collect all of the communications between them. Thus, although it is clear that the stolen DNC and Podesta documents were transferred from the GRU to WikiLeaks, and then the rest of the page is blacked out by Bill Barr. Page 46. The office was able to identify when the GRU, operating through its personas Guccifer 2.0 and DC Leaks, transferred some of the stolen documents to WikiLeaks through online archives set up by the GRU. Assange had access to the internet from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, England. And then there's a paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. On July 14, 2016, GRU officers used a Guccifer 2.0 email account to send WikiLeaks an email bearing the subject Big Archive and the message A New Attempt. The email contained an encrypted attachment with the name WKDNC link1.text.gpg. Using the Guccifer 2.0 Twitter account, GRU officers sent WikiLeaks an encrypted file and instructions on how to open it. On July 18, 2016, WikiLeaks confirmed in a direct message to the Guccifer 2.0 account that it had, quote, the 1 gig or so archive, end quote, that would make a release of the stolen documents, quote, this week. On July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks released over 20,000 emails and other documents stolen from the DNC computer networks. The Democratic National Convention began 3 days later. Similar communications occurred between WikiLeaks and the GRU-operated person's DC Leaks. On September 15, 2016, DC Leaks wrote to WikiLeaks, "Hi there, I'm from DC Leaks. How could we discuss some submission-related issues? I'm trying to reach out to you via your secured chat, but getting no response. I've got something that might interest you. You won't be disappointed, I promise." The WikiLeaks account responded, "Hi there," without further elaboration. The DC Leaks account did not respond immediately. That same day, the Twitter account, Guccifer2, sent DC Leaks a direct message, which is the first known contact between the personas. During subsequent communications, going to page 47, Guccifer 2.0 persona informed DC Leaks that WikiLeaks was trying to contact DC Leaks and arrange for a way to speak through encrypted emails. An analysis of the metadata collected from the WikiLeaks site revealed that the stolen Podesta emails show a creation date of September 19, 2016. Based on information about Assange's computer and its possible operating system, this date may be when the GRU staged the stolen Podesta emails for transfer to WikiLeaks, as the GRU had previously done in July 2016 for the DNC emails. The WikiLeaks site also released PDFs and other documents taken from Podesta that were attachments to emails in his account. These documents had a creation date of October 2nd, 2016, which appears to be the date the attachments were separately staged by WikiLeaks on its site. Beginning on September 20, 2016, WikiLeaks and DC Leaks resumed communications in a brief exchange. On September 22nd, 2016, a DC Leaks email account, dcleaksproject@gmail.com, sent an email to a WikiLeaks account with the subject submission and the message "Hi from DC Leaks." The email contained a PGP encrypted message with the file name wiki_mail.txt.gpg. Next sentence is blacked out by Bill Barr. The email, however, bears a number of similarities to the July 14, 2016 email in which GRU officers used the Guccifer 2.0 persona to give WikiLeaks access to the archive of DNC files. On September 22, 2016, the same day of DC Leaks' email to WikiLeaks, the Twitter account @DCLeaks sent a single message to @WikiLeaks with a string of characters, and then the rest of that paragraph is blacked out by Bill Barr. The office cannot rule out that stolen documents were transferred to WikiLeaks through intermediaries who visited during the summer of 2016. For example, public reporting identified Andrew Muller-Maghun as a WikiLeaks associate who may have assisted with the transfer of these stolen documents to WikiLeaks. And then the rest of page 47 is redacted by Bill Barr. Page 48, first paragraph is redacted by Bill Barr. On October 7, 2016, WikiLeaks released the first email stolen from the Podesta email account. In total, WikiLeaks released 33 tranches of stolen emails between October 7, 2016 and November 7, 2016. The releases included private speeches given by Clinton, internal communications between Podesta and other high-ranking members of the Clinton campaign, and correspondence related to the Clinton Foundation. In total, WikiLeaks released over 50,000 documents stolen from Podesta's personal email account. The last in time email released from Podesta's account was dated March 21, 2016, 2 days after Podesta received a spear-phishing email sent by the GRU. D. WikiLeaks statement dissembling about the source of stolen materials. As reports attributing the DNC and DCCC hacks to the Russian government emerged, WikiLeaks and Assange made several public statements apparently designed to obscure the source of the materials that WikiLeaks was releasing. The file transfer, evidence described above, and other information uncovered during the investigation discredit WikiLeaks' claims about the source of the material that it posted. Beginning in the summer of 2016, Assange and WikiLeaks made a number of statements about Seth Rich, a former DNC staff member who was killed in July of 2016. The statements about Rich implied falsely that he had been the source of the stolen DNC emails. It's the Mueller report. Washington, D.C., Portland. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's 34 minutes past the hour. Pam in Chicago. Hey, Pam, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom.
Hey.
Tom, I just listened to your previous caller, and it seems to me that there, I don't know, is no convincing Trump supporters. So let me understand this. I hope I understand this correctly. Impeachment will mandate that the Judicial Committee can call any administration personnel to testify. Is that correct?
That's correct, but the request for them to testify, in other words, the force, the physical violence that may be necessary to bring somebody, in other words, somebody shows up with guns and handcuffs and says, if you're not coming, I'm going to take you. That has to be done by the executive branch. That has to be done by the president. And
okay, understood.
Got it. Okay.
So here's where I am then. Go on and impeachment. They have to go on with impeachment proceedings and let them ignore, reject, or refuse to testify, because then the Republican Party will have to answer for those actions. But at this point, Tom, I don't see any other alternative but to impeach. And Tom, let me lastly
I agree with you, Pam, by the way.
Tom, I've only seen change in my lifetime through war, should I say civil war, civil disobedience, extreme civil disobedience, and that's because of the riots, Tom. And here in Chicago, we saw neighborhoods burn. Yep. I witnessed police being beaten by citizens, black citizens, but I also saw black citizens being beaten by police officers. So economic boycotts. We know what the Montgomery boycott did, shook this country to its core and made significant change. So, Tom, you are right to spell out all of the possible scenarios with Trump, because Trump is, we don't know what he's capable of, and it is frightening. So I would like to see a boycott personally, particularly with our wealthy people. Where are our wealthy liberal people, such as Warren Buffett and some of the other ones? Are they going to speak out?
Well, I think they're making, wealthy liberals. I mean, Tom Steyer is trying to get Trump impeached. There's not that many wealthy liberals who are willing to be politically active. I mean, it's like, who's going to spend their own money to raise their own taxes?
So it seems to me, Tom, it's always up to the poor, working class, middle class to try to fight these battles. But let's do it one step at a time. Impeach. Let Trump and his cohorts refuse to testify or whatever. Let Mitch McConnell, and the rest of Congress and the Republicans have to answer for that, those actions, and then we just move forward. Also, simultaneously having our candidates run for election and make the case why you should have a Democratic Senate and a Democratic president.
Yes.
We have to do it all, Tom. So is that possible? Is that logical?
I think it's extremely logical, Pam. I think that you have outlined the only two solutions that I've been able to think of, and I completely agree with you. And, the challenge is going to be if Congress tries to impeach Donald Trump and they can't get the main people who would testify to testify, they can't get the documents that they need. If they can't make a case, and this is the game that Trump is playing right now, and the Bill Barr is playing right now, is, and they absolutely know, Donald Trump is a worse crook than Richard Nixon ever was. And they know that when the impeachment hearings for Richard Nixon began in 1974, when those hearings began in 74, 19% of the American public thought that he should be impeached. And they were almost all Democrats. By the time, 6 weeks later, by the time Sam Ervin had all that testimony and everybody had heard exactly what Nixon had been up to and what crimes he had committed, over 60% of the American public was in favor of impeachment. And at that point, Republicans said, okay, you know, we can't ignore the people any longer. And Barry Goldwater himself personally walked over to the White House and sat down with Richard Nixon and said, buddy, you're out of here. And 3 days later, Nixon was gone. I mean, that's how it happened. And the Trump people know that. Bill Barr knows that. They were alive when that happened. They remember it very, very well. So what they're trying to avoid are those hearings, those public hearings where people will hear that, you know, Trump is a criminal. And the only thing they want people to remember is Bill Barr holding two different press conferences and two different testimonies before Congress saying, oh, no collusion, you know, no obstruction, everything's good, you know, lying through his teeth to Congress and to the American people. That's the only thing they want us to remember. And so go ahead, Pam.
I say, no, Tom, so I say let's start impeachment hearings. Let's do it now.
Amen.
And then let's move forward for that. My last question to you, Tom, and I'll hang up. Once Donald Trump is out of office, whether it's through impeachment or the election, can his and his administration, can their security clearances be revoked?
Yes.
A president's, okay, because there was some question about that. And I said, no, I thought a president's security clearance could be revoked.
Yes, I'm quite sure. And if he was impeached, certainly.
And it should
if
be
he simply
for his entire administration.
Yeah, if he simply loses the election, I'm pretty sure it could be also. Pam, thank you for the call.
I don't know how to get through to the Republican supporters of Trump, Tom. I don't know how.
Yeah, I have not figured out any secret handshake or anything.
Hang up. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks a lot, Pam. Maurice in Chicago. Hey, Maurice, what's up?
Hey, the cost of living is up, Tom. You're a good man, brother.
Thank you. What's on your mind?
All right, look, you cannot apply a political solution to an economic problem. Won't work. At its core, we're looking at an economic problem. And if you got an economic problem, what's required is an economic solution. Now, Pam, my sister from Chicago, she mentioned a couple of models that we could look at, like the Montgomery boycott, very successful. Then here's another model.
Well, hang on just a second, Maurice. The Montgomery boycott was only successful because the only thing that made the Montgomery bus system financially viable was African Americans using those buses to get to work. And
economics.
Exactly. But my point is that the bus system depended on its African American riders. I don't know of any sector in the American economy right now that is sufficiently dependent on Democratic activists. You know, whether it's racial groups or whether it's political groups. Do you know of one?
Let's look.
Where's the pressure point?
Let's take a look at these millions of angry Americans who are worried about the climate, abortion, education, pharmaceuticals. A lot of people mad, marching, right?
Yeah.
What if these people took a look at their accounts at Citibank, specifically Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America? I'm sure if, as a form of protest, we march to the banks instead of just marching and wearing out our shoes, you would see significant movement from these rich people to change their evil ways. What do you think?
I think you're right, Maurice, but I just don't see it happening. I mean, you know, Wells Fargo, for example.
Education.
Well, you know, this has been on the front page of the newspapers. Wells Fargo ripped off several million of their customers. They you know, just last week or the week before last, they were busted for another crime, and still, you know, they're still one of the 5 biggest banks in America. People are not fleeing Wells Fargo.
We got to keep hammering away, just like Trump does. Tweet it. Talk it, pray it, preach it. We got to take it to the banks, Tom.
Okay.
And use the credit unions as an alternative. Thanks, man. You're a very smart guy.
Thank you, Maurice. And I agree with your call to move to credit unions. It's absolutely what we have to do. Denny in Pine Top, Arizona. Hey, Denny, what's on your mind?
Hey, good morning, Tom. You're a candle in a storm at night. Well,
thank you.
We have incrementally managed to find ourselves in a position where capitalistic democracy has or is actually failing. And I agree with one of your recent callers we should have started 16 years ago instead of 16 weeks ago, and follow some of the thoughts Howard Tribe, Tom Steyer, Alan Lichtman.
Well, I think part of the problem, Denny, is that after Nixon, Jerry Ford said, "Oh, we're going to let Nixon go," and then after Reagan, after Iran-Contra and Iraq-gate, Bill Barr recommended that Bush Sr. pardon, 6 people involved with that, and so they pardoned, Ollie North, and they pardoned Caspar Weinberger, and they pardoned, what's his name, the guy who's down now in Venezuela trying to stir things up. Say what? Elliot Abrams, yeah. So, I mean, we have, George W. Bush committed war crimes. He had people inside the White House saying war crimes are just fine, thank you very much. The CIA destroyed over 100 videotapes of torture, and he was never held to account for that. We basically have no tradition of holding presidents accountable for anything. And I think that Trump is the logical consequence of that.
100%. So let me paint the scenario. As a Vietnam-era combat veteran and ex-cop, grew up in Flint. My dad was similar to your dad, a machinist, union. At the end of the day, let's say Trump refuses to leave office after a successful Democrat election in 2020. Picture this, and it's great for television. Prior to the installation, Trump walks in for his morning briefing, and the Allied staff and the commander-in-chief is there, and in come the military police and secure him in handcuffs, and he is held as an unlawful president, and it's...
you know what, Denny, let me pause you right there, because what would precede Donald Trump refusing to leave the White House, before he would refuse to leave the White House, let's say it's the day before the inauguration of the new president, before he would refuse to leave the White House, he would ask millions of people to come to Washington, D.C. and surround the White House and bring their guns. Then what do you do?
And one Apache helicopter will take care of that. When the commander-in-chief...
Well, that's what Eisenhower... I mean, when Hoover was president, and there was all those tent cities, between the White House and the Potomac River. It was just solid tent cities. They called it a Hooverville. And Dwight Eisenhower, as I recall, maybe I'm mixing up my generals, but some general rode through there, with tanks and horses and stuff, and busted it up, and a few people got killed and whatnot. But it was called the Bonus Army. I mean, this is between World War I and World War II.
My point is, Tom, that the commander-in-chief is not the commander-in-chief if he expects his general to follow an unlawful order.
Yeah. Well,
that general.
Yeah, Denny, I think you're right.
That general.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think the problem. Sorry for me moving along, but I know a break is going to hit us any second here. My point is, I'm not. Right now, I'm not so worried about Trump refusing to leave office, although I think it's something that we should be talking about now, because 2 years ago, we should have been talking about what happens if Trump refuses to comply with the law under any circumstances. But I'm concerned about what happens with these hearings in Congress if Trump continues to stonewall them.
It would take us 2 hours to go through that. We should start currying favor with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, because it will come down to UCMJ, and it happened in Vietnam many times. Commanders on lower levels found themselves in dire straits, even fragged. You can catch that meaning later. There are, when it comes to the ultimate...
I get what you're saying, Denny, and again, that's like, oh, we're going to put all our faith and hope in the military. Which is great. I mean, it's a strong institution, and hopefully it will work. But wow, Denny, thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
I'm getting a little less freaked out as we go along. So we'll continue the conversation. Stick around. And welcome back. Jay in Raymore, Missouri. Hey, Jay, what's on your mind today?
Hey, so I've got the answer to your question about the remedy for enforcing the subpoenas.
Okay.
And that's the Capitol Police. Now, you said the Sergeant at Arms can't leave the building, but I looked at Title II of Congress, Chapter 29, Capitol Police, Subchapter 2, Section 1967. And Part A of that says that the Capitol Police shall have authority to make arrests and otherwise enforce the laws of the United States, including the laws of the District of Columbia. And it's got a couple of conditions, and number 4 is within the area described under subsection B1, and then B1 basically puts this block around the area that Congress is in. I think it's roughly 200 square blocks-ish.
Right. So, I'm not sure that the Capitol Police, I mean, the Sergeant at Arms and the Capitol Police are different things. The Sergeant at Arms.
It's under Title II, so it's part of the legislative.
No, I get this. Let me finish this thought real quick. And the Sergeant at Arms of the House of Representatives is one entity, one body, right? There's multiple people involved in that office. There's also a Sergeant at Arms for the Senate, and then you've got the Capitol Police, which has a much larger scope across the Capitol. Now, I'm not sure that the Capitol Police have to respond to the Sergeant at Arms of either the House or the Senate. And what happens? And what happens if Nancy Pelosi tells the Sergeant at Arms or the Capitol Police, go arrest, McGahn, and then Mitch McConnell says, don't arrest McGahn?
All right. So the first part of this law enforcement authority section basically says that the House of Representatives and the Committee on Rules of Administration of the Senate, the Capitol Police shall have the authority to make arrests. All right. So if they are within that block and they go to arrest them, then that's a lawful arrest. And if they defy that, well, I mean,
all Don McGahn has to do is move to Baltimore.
Yeah, but if he ever shows up in the area, and if you look at
no, that'll expire. This is what happened. The last 2 times the presidents were held in contempt of Congress, is that the contempt order expires when the Congress expires, which is every 2 years.
Right. So you're telling me that Attorney General, who's also defied a subpoena, is not going to show up in D.C. for 2 years? Now, I can see where maybe McGahn wouldn't.
Yeah.
But anybody else that is that works on those premises are subject to this
Jay,
authority.
You may well be absolutely right. And here's the problem. What do you do if the Attorney General simply says, no, you can't arrest me. I'm surrounded by the FBI. I'm the head of the Justice Department. I'm the head of all, a dozen different police agencies. I'm the head of the Secret Service. They're protecting me. Sorry, Capitol Police, you can't even come in my building.
Yeah. So, that's a, what do you call it, a face-off.
Yeah. Yeah, Mexican standoff is the old, probably racist expression, but yeah.
Yeah, but they have the authority to do it if they're within that little boundary area.
Okay, well, we'll see. It's getting really interesting. It's getting really interesting.
It's blatant.
Yeah. Jay, thank you for the call. And thanks for watching us on YouTube. We'll be right back. It's 52 minutes past the hour. Stick around. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. Only podcast over at thomhartmann.com. And our special welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Dawn in Norcross, Georgia. Hey, Dawn, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Listen, I just want to carry this out to the extreme, but I have been thinking about this for months. So just hear me out, if you would.
Sure.
Donald Trump is an agent of the Russian government. And besides Putin and the oligarchs that support him, he's being supported by multiple Russian enthusiasts such as Mitch McConnell and other Republicans, and many corporations, all of whom are making lots of money from their connections with Russia and the Russian government. Donald Trump's goal is to destroy the people's will and our democratic republic. He is very much in the process of destroying our institutions and our norms. He's allowing the fight and the animosity between those who support him and those of us who do not is making it easy for our government to fall. When it does, Vladimir Putin and the Russians will be standing closely by to take over. Trump wants nothing more than that. He and his family will be the wealthiest oligarchs and will live like the kings and queens that they think that they should be.
Yeah.
Tom, I'm not writing a spy novel.
No, Dawn, I get it. I get it. The one place where I disagree with you is I think that you're giving Russia way too much credit. For example, Russia was not responsible for a right-wing authoritarian strongman takeover in Brazil. That was the local billionaires in Brazil. Russia, I don't think, was responsible for the authoritarian right-wing takeover in Turkey. That was the wealthy people in Turkey.
Excuse me for 1 second, Tom.
Sure.
But Russia was responsible for putting Donald Trump as president of the United States. And how many senators were put in as Russia, by Russia's help? You and I don't know that, but we know that they
No, and we know that a handful of Republican senators went to visit Moscow on the 4th of July last year.
Right,
I get all that, but what I'm saying is that it's not so much one particular country that's like the agent of evil in the world, and this is X. It is a worldwide conspiracy of oligarchs and right-wing billionaires to take down small d democracy, small r republics, in my opinion. Dawn, thank you for the call. And I think Russia's part of that, but I just think you're giving them too much credit. Anyhow, we'll continue the conversation tomorrow, along with a whole lot of other new things as the news rolls along. In the meantime, please don't forget democracy is not a spectator sport. What democracy we have left, get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.